I might do if my voice starts to crack up. Good evening, everybody. I am Councillor Dennis Spooner, the Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. May I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. So nobody is indicating, so nobody is recording. Thank you. I would like to advise members that they should only address the meeting by way of their microphones and to remind them to turn their microphones off when they have finished speaking. Item number 1 on the agenda, apologies from absence. We've received absences from Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Reardon. Are there any others? Looking around, I can see there are none. Thank you. Item number 2, substitute members. I have Councillor Eagle.
Yeah, Councillor Eagle for Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Councillor Eagle. And
good evening, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Garton for Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Visiting members, I can see at least one. Would you like to come forward and just say which item you're speaking on?
Councillor Fort, Abbey Farm.
Thank you, Councillor Fort. And I've just noticed Councillor Harper over there in the corner. And yes.
Councillor Harper for item number 16 and 17.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. And Councillor Coates.
Good evening. Item 16, 17.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Item number 4 on the agenda, items withdrawn. So far as I'm aware, there are none to be withdrawn. Is that correct, Councillor? Thank you. Item number 5, date of the adjourned meeting. We will be having an adjourned meeting. It will be next Monday, the 25th. I anticipate we will get through our complete agenda this evening. Item number 6, urgent items. I intend to take these urgent update reports as any verbal updates are urgent items, and they contain further information relating to matters to be considered at this meeting. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Disclosures by members. Are there any? If I go around the room clockwise. Councillor Garton.
It's probably not a disclosure necessary to make, but for just for openness of government, I think I should declare that with a post-sorting office, Councillor Russell and myself were cabinet members, and we took the decision to knock the sorting office down. So that we were assured by Democratic Services that should not prejudice us in any which way for tonight's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Councillor Perry.
I won't repeat, but Councillor Garton said I'm in the same position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. That is both duly noted for both of you. And Councillor Russell.
Just the same for me as
okay,
well.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures by officers? No. Disclosures of lobbying. If I go around the table clockwise, Councillor Gooch.
Item 14, Abbey Farm.
Thank you. Councillor Cox? You didn't have your hand up. Yeah.
Item 14, definitely. Thank you.
Councillor Gooch, I think you said Councillor 14 and another one. Didn't quite catch it. You didn't? Okay. Okay. Sorry. Councillor Wilkinson?
14, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Eagle?
Item 14.
Councillor English?
Item 14.
Has anybody not been lobbied on item 14? Right. So I assume you all, like, okay, all the rest you have. Councillor Garton hasn't. But is there anything else you've been lobbied on?
No, not really, except
Okay.
what I just said with regards to the sorting office.
Councillor Harwood?
Yes, I've been very heavily lobbied on item 15.
Thank you. Has everybody else been, anyone else on item 15? Councillor Kimmets? Councillor Kimmets? Sorry. Okay. Councillor McKenna?
14 and 15.
Councillor Garton, we've already dealt with. Councillor Perry
14, thank you.
and Councillor Russell.
14 and 15.
And I've been lobbied on 14 and 15. Item number 9, to consider whether any members should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that all the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Item number 10, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of February and on the 22nd of February, as set out on page 1 of your papers. I move that these minutes be agreed. Is that agreed by you all? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Beg your pardon. Yes, there were 3 resolutions, all concerning communicating this committee's wishes to Paul Cooper, the Cabinet Member for Planning. So firstly, I've written a letter on behalf of the Chairman and Vice Chairman and myself on the need for local parking standards, particularly given the age of the county's parking standards, which from memory I think are 16 years old. Nice. Yeah, so that's been done. What's also been done is there was a request that the Cabinet Member explore having our own in-house ecologist. So that's been done. And lastly, there is specific concern, which has been again relayed to the Cabinet Member, concerning dog exercise areas, because I think at the adjourned meeting there was an application for a dog exercise area, and we've had quite a spate of them recently.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. Moving on now to where are we? Lost himself. Item number 11, petitions. There are no petitions this evening. Item number 12, deferred items, and I'll ask Mr. Jarman to say something about those.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a matter of work in progress on all of them.
We'd just like to make a slight amendment to the running order. I'd like to deal with item 13 first, which is plot 1 Peacock Farm, Chart Hill. We may be able to deal with this one very, very quickly. Can I ask if any councillor wishes to speak against the officer's recommendation? None at all. In that case, I propose from the chair that we approve the application as per the order papers. Is that seconded? Is that agreed by everybody? Thank you. Can you please put your hands up? It's being told what to do here. Thank you, members. Right, thank you for agreeing to that. It just gets one application out of the way very quickly. Right, we can now move on to the other items on our agenda. Item 14, which is Abbey Farm Lower Street Leeds. And I'll ask Mr. Fletcher to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you. So the application tonight is in Leeds on the south side of Lower Street and seeks to build 3 detached dwellings, carry out conversion and restoration works to existing buildings on site, which include the Grade 2 listed Slipe and Dovecot, and restoration of the historic landscape, including repair of 2 ragstone walls. The proposal also involves the installation of a new vehicular access to Lower Street, parking arrangements and other associated works, such as the demolition of 2 modern barns. So in policy terms, the application site is located in the countryside, and the starting point for all applications in the countryside is Local Plan Policy SB 17. As the site is not a brownfield site, there are no exception policies allowing residential development in this location. However, this application site is unique in that there are a number of exceptionally valuable heritage assets on site. An extensive area of the proposed development site is protected as a scheduled monument under the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act 1979. The monument is a multi-period site which retains the nationally significant remains of the Leeds Priory monastic complex, a post-dissolution manor house and part of their associated grounds. As such, the application must be assessed by weighing up the harm that development causes to the countryside against the benefit of restoring and safeguarding the historic assets on site, assets which benefit from the highest level of consideration. And in this case, we are recommending to members that the benefits outweigh the harm caused. On your screens here, you can see the heritage map, which details some of the locations of the assets. Here's a view across the western part of the site. So on the left, we have the Dovecot. You can see 2 of the modern barns that be demolished in the middle, and some of the converted buildings on the right. And we'll delve into some of the other site photos in a bit. The proposed site plan with the proposed cottages on the western side of the application site, and the new dwelling on the east. So to begin with the proposed dwellings, first, the main dwelling is a 6-bedroom country house on the brow of the hill outside the known archaeological remnants of the abbey. The design adopts a Queen Anne period style. The design philosophy has changed since the previously refused application and is no longer focused on recreating the Brownian landscape. Whilst of some scale, the proposed dwelling fits within the landscape and responds to and acknowledges the history of the site. The proposed location would be a less sensitive one for the development of a large house and the associated services. The 2 3-bedroom dwellings are proposed to the front, the entrance of the site onto Lower Street. It is proposed that these will not be sold separately, but will be retained within the wider land ownership. Both offer 2 different interpretations of vernacular properties that can be found within Leeds. The proposed scale and staggered building line makes these appear more organically formed. The proposed materials contribute to the different appearance. These will also weather differently and will soften over time. The intrinsic character of the countryside is generally that of a lack of development. And the proposal seeks to establish a new large dwelling in what is predominantly a site characterised by a lack of development. And as such, the development would result in some harm to the intrinsic character of the area. For the harm to be acceptable, it would need to be offset by the benefits. The application is complex, and as well as the restoration works to Dovecot and Slipe, which are scheduled monuments and listed, it also involves the restoration of a number of structures on site, such as Grade 2 listed walls, the landscape itself, which is deemed a non-designated heritage asset, as well as the above and below ground archaeological remains of the medieval Leeds Priory, which is also a scheduled monument, which the application will secure. So in the interests of time, I'll try to focus on some of the larger buildings on site. So first we have the Dovecot. This is a photo when it was last intact in 1911. So dovecots are exceptionally rare, and the restoration and long-term safeguarding would be a significant benefit. Dovecots are important indicators in that their size and design depended upon the status and land ownership. During the reign of Elizabeth I, a pigeon tower was a privilege reserved only for feudal lords, and the law was enforced. Here's its current condition. Here's the slipe. A slipe in architecture is a covered passageway in a medieval English cathedral or monastery. And in this instance, the slipe consists of the remains of a medieval building with post-medieval brickwork additions and its attached walls. The slipe and dovecots at Abbey Farm are both recorded in Historic England's Heritage at Risk Register in 2023, as are the above and below ground archaeological remains of Leeds Priory. The condition of all is recorded as very bad, and the priority category as AA, which is the highest category of priority. Scheduled monuments benefit from the highest level of heritage protection and consideration, and their restoration gives great weight to the application. Both buildings are at risk of serious structural decay, with extensive damaging vegetation growing throughout. There have been multiple rounds of demolition on site over the course of time, and it's very fortunate that both buildings have survived until the present day. The heritage benefits of the application are to bring 3 scheduled monuments off the National Heritage at Risk Register and provide them with long-term protection, and therefore this should be afforded great weight as part of the planning consideration. Additional benefits include allowing some managed public access and wider interpretation, such as the website, as well as the restoration of other listed structures on the site and the maintenance of the non-designated heritage landscape, all of which is conditioned. The applicant has been liaising with Historic England in the formulation of the proposed scheme, and it is supported in principle by that statutory consultee. The NPPF details how local planning authorities should assess whether the benefits of the proposal for enabling development, which would otherwise conflict with planning policies which would secure the future conservation of a heritage asset, outweigh the disbenefits from departing from those policies. The officer report accepts that there will be harm caused to the countryside. The site, which is relatively undeveloped, will be more intensively occupied with more built form added. However, the 2 dwellings to the front of the site are of an appropriate design, and the main dwelling is not overly visible from the street scene, and as such, its impact on the wider area would be limited. In this case, there are limited alternatives by which there could be enforcement of the conservation or repair of the structures, and therefore any further decline could result in the loss of these highly significant designated heritage assets. The cost of the works to conserve and protect for the mid to long term has been satisfactorily demonstrated to be prohibitively expensive. The use of enabling development would be an alternative option. To put simply, this would allow the developer to build additional houses to cover the conservation costs. However, the costs of the heritage restoration and long-term maintenance are estimated to be so large they would need planning permission for an even greater number of new dwellings to cover all the restoration costs and to bring a suitable profit for the developer, which is a key element of enabling development. The works to repair and secure the heritage assets, namely the slipe, dovecots and other historic features, was cost at £2.5 million in January 2021. This will have significantly increased since then. There's also the cost of additional restorative landscaping and the ongoing maintenance of the assets in the restored landscape. The figures given by the applicant are accepted, and it's also agreed that a greater number of housing units would fragment the site, resulting in the loss of the historic landscape and would likely cause much more domestic paraphernalia being introduced into the countryside, built form, hard standing, vehicle movements, etc. And as such would be much more harmful overall. Also, it would split the site into multiple ownership, making it difficult to safeguard and maintain the heritage landscape. It is therefore concluded that the current proposal of creating a new large country house with 2 associated dwellings in an appropriate location on the site represents the best overall option for protecting, restoring and maintaining the historical significance of this sensitive site. There are only 27 scheduled monuments in the borough and include medieval bridges, castles and other structures of that period. Stonehenge is a scheduled monument, which highlights how this scheduling is the highest level of heritage status. There are 12 sites in Maidstone which are on the Heritage at Risk Register, and this application would eventually lead to the removal of 3 of them from this list. So that's a quarter of the borough's heritage at risk safeguarded through one planning application, and this would be a significant benefit for the borough. The circumstances for this application are unique. It is extremely unlikely that a similar development could take place elsewhere in the countryside. It has been assessed that the benefits of restoring and safeguarding the heritage assets on site outweigh the harm caused by the development. The application now proposes a much more sensitive scheme that includes a more thorough assessment of the heritage value of the site, and it is assessed as overcoming the previous reasons for refusal. As such, the officer recommendation is to approve the application with the heads of terms and conditions detailed within the officer report and the urgent update, which details how there were some ongoing ecological issues at the time of writing the application, but these have now been resolved and some additional conditions are recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Some interesting and complex issues involved there. We have 4 speakers. Mr. Saunders is the first one, who is an objector. If you would like to come forward to the desk, and once you press the middle button, I think you call it, at the bottom of that pad, your microphone will light up red, and you will have 3 minutes in which to speak, and I will stop you after 3 minutes to be fair to everybody else. The floor is yours.
We live at Abbey Farmhouse, adjacent to the development site. Our property has dual designation, both Grade 2 listed and within the scheduled ancient monument. This application is an unsustainable location. It's in an unsustainable location situated within the open countryside and without access to essential services or public transport. All future occupants will be solely reliant on cars. This was a key reason for refusal on the previous application and still stands. Historic England support this application in order to secure the removal of 2 structures from the Heritage at Risk register. There has been no attempt to protect the dovecot under a temporary roof, which questions the applicant's heritage integrity. Historic England make no mention of our property in their report, deferring to the LPA, yet no formal response has been made by the conservation officer. This is a serious omission, and our home and the conservation area will be directly impacted by the proposal. How can the restoration of the at-risk structures be justified by the erection of a 6-bed pastiche mansion within a historic farmstead and 2 new-build 3- and 4-bedroom detached homes to the forefront of a listed building? The mansion house and gatehouses will be fully visible from the street scene, significantly eroding the green gap between the 2 parts of the Leeds settlement, without any tangible justification and no viability assessment to show some £4 million worth of new property is actually required to safeguard dilapidated heritage assets. The lack of logic here is astounding. The council is prepared to significantly harm 2 conservation areas and a Grade 2 listed building to reinstate 2 heritage assets that a previous owner has allowed to rot and decay. It makes no sense whatsoever. The application fails to appropriately assess the harm to our home, with barely a mention of it within the heritage impact statement. The position of our property, existing gateway and parking arrangements are excluded from maps and plans with a fictitious drive shown in our front garden. We have a legal right of access over the current driveway. This cannot be closed off. The proposed new access to our property does not even meet with our vehicle and pedestrian gateway or to our parking area and will result in a total loss of parking in breach of DM23. Are the elected members of this committee happy to grant permission for unsustainable homes that significantly harm the setting of the listed building and erode the green gap between 2 established conservation areas without any significant justification or viability assessment? I would like to believe members will find that the benefits of this application do not outweigh the significant harm that is readily evident, and I respectfully request that the members refuse this application on the grounds of sustainability and an unacceptable degree of harm to the setting of a listed building, harm to the setting of the conservation area, and by virtue of the high degree of harm the scheme would have on the open countryside.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Nicely timed in your 3 minutes. Well done. Thank you. Mr. Grief, is that how you pronounce the name for Leeds Parish Council? I think you've probably been here before, so you know how the system works.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. So Leeds Parish Council objects against the application. There's a number of reasons, but I'll focus on three main reasons. Now, the creation of two cottages and a Queen Anne style house visible from the street will irreversibly harm the setting of two conservation areas and harm the setting of a listed building. Now, the newly updated conservation management plan sent to us as a parish council clearly states that damage to conservation area can be from within the conservation area and a view to the from the conservation area. Now, this planning office document has been circulated to us, and we've been using that to assess other applications, as we get in front of the parish council. Now, it's been stated that the dwelling fits within the landscape and responds and acknowledges the history of the site. Now, I don't believe that's correct. It's a Queen Anne style building with no link to the past of either the site, and there's no other building of that nature within Leeds Village or close to Leeds Village. So it's contradictory to state that it complements and enhances the site, and it's got history to the site. Also, and it actually goes against the guidelines that we've been given in terms of assessing applications. Now, it also states in the planning committee report that we are waiting KCC ecology report. Now, I find it really surprising that there's a recommendation made despite the fact that there's no ecology response yet. And this is a site with a high degree of ecology and a quite important site in Leeds Village. It's the start of Priory Stream that flows throughout the rest of the village with brown trout migrating up the stream. So I don't know how this can be assessed without that. The last point is really about the addition of second access point into the site. Now, in the application or in the report, it states that there's previous evidence of entrance, but that's from an ordnance survey map of 1951. That's 73 years ago. The traffic volumes and the housing density has significantly changed since then. So to use that as a basis of approving a second access is interesting, to say the least. Now, Leeds Parish Council for the last decade have been asking to introduce traffic calming on the B2163 without success, and so we find it incomprehensible that a second entrance will be introduced into a very busy, dangerous road right next to a playing field, which is regularly used by both the village and outsiders to the village. So I don't understand the second access point on a very dangerous place with no visible displays at all. So really, just to summarize for me, the plan as it stands contravenes planning guidelines that's been given to us. Number two, there's no result from ecological surveys. And also,
sorry, can I cut you off? I'm sorry, you've had your 3 minutes. Thank you. I do have to do this to be fair to everybody else. But thank you very much for coming this evening. Mr. Spicer for the applicants. Right. If you haven't been here before, say you just press the button at the bottom, then you have 3 minutes from when your microphone lights up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Firstly, I just want to send the apologies of the applicant. He wanted to be here himself to speak to you, but hasn't been able to do so. So he sends his apologies. I don't want to dwell too much on the history of the site, but I do just want to give a quick recap of the real significance of this site. So as you're aware, the site is a scheduled monument, and that means it's of national significance as a heritage asset. It has a long and rich history. So it was a Norman abbey associated with Leeds Castle, after which, during the reign of Henry VIII, it was partly demolished under the dissolution of Henry VIII, as I said. It then became a large stately manor house known as Meredith Mansion, and then latterly, during the more recent centuries, it was in part redesigned, or the landscape was, by Lancelot Capability Bram. Subsequently, in the 19th and 20th centuries, the site fell into disrepair, and the last upstanding remains remained the vaulted passageway of the former abbey, a grand Tudor dovecot, and the medieval walls. The remaining history of the site exists in landform and archaeological remains. As been stated, the site in its current form is, at risk of being lost in its entirety. and it is on the Heritage at Risk Register, which is drawn up by Historic England, the government's historic advisors, and it's rated at the highest urgency for repair and custodianship. So the applicant purchased a site wanting to make this site his home, and wanting to be the custodian of those heritage assets himself. And the proposals before you are a culmination of over 3 years of research, investigation and optioneering, both with Historic England and with the council's own conservation officer. The scheme itself would repair, restore and secure the long-term heritage significance of the site with an appropriate amount of new development, allowing it to be delivered and the heritage benefits to be delivered without external funding or public cost. And we have welcomed the opportunity to work with Historic England and your officers, which has led to their support for the scheme. Just very quickly, want to reinstate the benefits of the scheme. So that is repair, restoration and reinstatement of the site, which is the last upstanding remain of the former abbey. Repair, restore and reinstate the dovecot, a building whose construction needed dispensation from the Crown. Repair and reinstatement of the remains of the medieval walls. Sensitive management and enhancement of the historic landscape. Significant ecological enhancement and biodiversity net gain. Managed public and academic research access to the site on specified days of the year, and removal of the site from the Heritage at Risk Register. And it is therefore my hope that you can agree that protection and preservation of the heritage assets and the significant benefits to the cultural heritage of Leeds Village and the Borough of Maidstone are compelling, and we ask officers to support the recommendation to grant permission, subject, of course, to the comprehensive conditions which have been proposed.
Thank you very much. That was just within your 3 minutes. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Ford, I'm sure you know what to do.
Good evening. I have a number of concerns regarding this application. It has been suggested by the applicants that the existing site entrance is not suitable and is dangerous. I've lived in this village for 20 years and cannot recall an accident in this location. I would suggest that the occupant of the mansion would like to exit their estate via they would not like to exit their estate via shared driveway by local playing fields. So it is now proposed that 2 new entrances are placed on the main B1263. One for a new site, one for the new estate, and one additional for the residents of Abbey Farmhouse. The 2 proposed entrances on the top of Foley Hill and are on a blind bend. I understand that KCC, as a highways authority, have not objected, but I do query whether they've actually visited site. As a local resident with knowledge, I know that motorists drive along this stretch of road at speed in both directions, trying to avoid the George Pinch point. The new entrances are dangerous in terms of visibility for both by both those travelling along the road and those joining it from the site. I understand that there was a map of 1951 in the application which showed the access point near these new positions. The owners of the site of Abbey Farm can find no trace of this track, and let's be honest, traffic in 1951 cannot compare to today. This needs rethinking. The response to the proposals from Heritage England included an initial landscape management plan. The landscape plan was very recently amended to avoid doing bat surveys required for tree removal. Heritage England and indeed Kent Garden Trust based their response on the restoration of the landscape and highlighted this as a public benefit. This benefit has now been removed and both parties should have been consulted. The heritage statement provided as part of this application does not align with those recent changes. The current rural landscape between the two conservation areas contribute greatly to their setting. The additional 2 4-bedroom detached houses, which have been classed as cottages between the conservation areas in the open countryside in front of Abbey Farmhouse, is detrimental to its setting and is contrary to planning policy SP18. With new build from form in this location, a new precedent is being set for infilling between conservation areas.
I'm sorry, Councillor Ford, you've had your 3 minutes. I'm so sorry. Thank you very much for coming along. Right, Mr. Jarman would just like to have a word before I open up to the floor. Mr. Jarman?
Yeah, hopefully it's to be more efficient. First of all, I'd like to welcome our Conservation Officer, Janice Gooch. So any sort of specialist questions, Janice can answer them. But as been said tonight, in a way, this is a precedent because we've got 12 ancient monuments in the entire borough, and this makes up 3 of them. So yes, it is a non-run-of-the-mill application. There's obviously a hierarchy to consultees, and that's been reaffirmed in at least one recent court case where obviously at the pinnacle of any sort of weight given to consultees is the statutory consultees, you know, for obvious reasons, because you've got to consult them legally. And we have been involved in talks with Historic England for some time now, and as you can clearly see from your papers, they have not objected, and they've clearly analysed the balance of issues here. Plan is always a balance of issues. Tonight we'll discuss a proposal which is cheek by jowl with listed buildings in a conservation or very close to a conservation area. Conservation areas have never been about, you know, preserving things in aspect. It's about, you know, making the changes which will inevitably come as benign as possible. Sustainability's been mentioned as another objection, but we've already approved 2 applications in the past. Sustainability was an issue 20 years ago. So that'd be very difficult to hold up. And then lastly, there's been objections about the proposed access. The access is being proposed because the existing access is inadequate in terms of sightlines. So what's being proposed is an improvement, and obviously KCC highways work to standards which are set out in the manual for streets, and it's as close to standard that can be achieved. But the main thing is what's being proposed is an improvement, and KCC highways have agreed to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. I have councillors Russell, McKenna, English and Harwood and Garton. So take them in that order. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question which I'll ask in a minute, but so obviously the starting point for this is SP17, and number 1 says development proposals in the countryside will not be permitted unless they accord with other policies in this plan, and they'll not result in harm to the character and appearance of the area. So leaving out the second bit for a minute, it needs to accord with other policies in this plan. So I'm assuming the only one that you could consider, because normally then we would get the eco, passive house concept, or fantastic design, or that's where we would then get that. But we don't have that necessarily in this case. So I'm presuming then what we're saying that it accords with is the DM4, which is that these heritage assets are so significant that it accords with DM4. However, when you look at DM4, it then says that we need to, where possible, enhance the significance of the heritage asset, park that for a minute, and where appropriate, it's setting. Now, my concern is it's not just the setting of the application that we're looking at, it's the setting of the things that are around it. When I look what's around it, then we've got the Abbey farmhouse and the Abbey Millhouse. And when I look at the officer's report, it then does say overall the proposed scheme is considered to cause harm, which is less than substantial harm to the setting of these neighbouring listed buildings. So my issue with this, coming up to my question is that the only policy that we're saying that it accords with, which would outweigh the SP17? And what considerations were given to the other grouping of the other heritage assets that are in that area, in particular their setting?
Yeah, firstly, my apologies, because I should have stated that last night Council decided to adopt the local plan review. Full weight cannot be given to it because the judicial review period has not yet elapsed, but nevertheless it's a substantial material consideration. So that's particularly germane for this application and others in the countryside, simply because what was agreed inter alia was that now there's got to be significant harm to the countryside. So what we are saying is that there's some harm in terms of the comings and goings people, but we certainly don't think there's significant harm. And I've not heard thus far people identifying what that significant harm is. As a sort of seesaw of other issues, as you said yourself, Councillor Russell, yeah, there's policies about, you know, it's obviously not about just about conserving things, heritage assets, but why we are convinced that the balance tips towards approval is that we think that this offers the council the opportunity to improve heritage assets, namely 3 scheduled ancient monuments. On top of that, so that's the sort of heritage policies, but Will can sort of identify exactly which ones they are. But on top of that, we also think there's ecological benefits as well in terms of rewilding. So in very simple terms, there's a question mark in straightforward terms about the harm. I definitely don't think what council agreed to, significant harm, is being caused. But on the other hand, there's the opportunity, because, you know, it's up to you if you want to approve or refuse the application. There's clear sort of enabling works which will improve the ancient monuments. And secondly, there's the opportunity of what I think is fairly extensive rewilding.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. There's some critical issues there we need to get our mind down. Councillor Russell, want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. On one point specifically, so in our bundle last night, it said that our local plan policies are enacted 6 weeks from the date of adoption. So I'm not sure that we're yet with those ones. Otherwise, we should we not, a bound copy that we could look through when we're determining these. So I think we are in that window. Obviously, they have great weight, but we have not yet chucked SP17 as it currently stands out the window. So yeah, that was just what I wanted to pick up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions, if I may, and I may have misunderstood what Mr. Saunders was saying. So a couple of things. One, have there been any comments from Leeds Castle, obviously being, you know, a massive sort of in the area, one of the pick up, have they been approached? Have they commented? And secondly, are we awaiting a KCC ecological survey? And if we are, we've got them. Right, okay, I misread that then. So it's just the questions if Leeds Castle have been approached for comment on the application.
Right, thank you, Councillor McKenna. Councillor English.
It's a pity in a way that so much of the time the earlier speakers was spent on highways issues. We've been there before, regardless of our personal knowledge of sites or whatever. If the County Highways Authority has not objected to an application, it is pointless. It is pointless for us going over any highways objections. So this issue comes back entirely to the issue of the weight to be given to the preservation of nationally important heritage assets as against some other design and countryside issues. Having actually looked at this site, I don't think its current condition is exactly conducive to the maintenance of a good impact on the conservation area, to be honest, but that's an aside. Nor do I think, as have been alluded, as I gather there's a new owner, that they can be blamed for the deterioration of that site over the years. What I would say is that it is a question of balance. And having looked at this balance very, very carefully, I do have to think that it could well be, given the nature of the assets that are being protected, that there could have been a justification for a much bigger enabling development on this site. And the balance is probably right here, because if we end up with a situation where we unravel what actually seems to be quite a reasonable solution, what we could end up with is an application coming in just to save the scheduled monuments, which will probably might be allow through the door rather more housing units, and we won't get the biodiversity and countryside landscape improvements. So we've got to be very careful about this, because in previous situations where we've had enabling development for much less important assets, the council has ended up with those applications being approved in order to bring forward the enabling development, but without a lot of the conditions being neatly tied up and without appropriate Section 106s. We've been down there with developments in the Lewes Valley in the past, which those of us who've been on this committee a long time will recall, where we set impact on the Lewes conservation area, and the protection of the countryside was less important than bringing back certain heritage assets, which were not nationally significant heritage assets. So we've got to be careful, because we have gone down the path of refusing such applications, albeit at a lower level of significance in the past, and regretted it. So caution people to weigh this very carefully. Finally, in terms of the sustainability argument, yeah, those of us who've sat through many committees over the year will realise that sustainability appears to be an argument that is rather like, what's the length of a piece of string? Different inspectors, different committees have taken different views of sustainability over the years, and it does appear very hard to come up with a measurement that is robust. Well, what we do know is that if there are extant planning permissions being built out on neighbouring sites, as there is here, it is actually quite difficult to sustain a sustainability argument, because whilst there is no precedent as such in planning, there is a requirement for a certain degree of consistency, and you've got fairly close sites which have got consent, the sustainability argument has pretty much gone out the window. So I would say, on balance, we've got to be very, very careful about saying that we don't move forward with this, because there could be a significantly larger degree of proposed development.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a really very significant application for a number of reasons. In terms of the scheduled ancient monuments, a third of those we actually host in the borough, but also in terms of landscape and biodiversity, and indeed of future proofing, which I think was part of what Councillor English has been discussing. It's a site I know very well. I've known it for a very long time. I have my partner actually used to live in Abbey Farmhouse, so I know it quite intimately, and I understand the deterioration which has occurred on the site, both in terms of the buildings and in terms of the landscape. It's worth saying. I mean, if you were to see the pond a few years ago, before it was so heavily silted, when there was less intensive farming where the arable field, which is talking about reversion, it has changed and not for the better. I think if we can stop the rot, we may need to take a large building and 2 tied 3-bedroom buildings to do that. However, that could mean a lesser future development, and I do worry about the fields and so on that are around and about in the longer term. I think in terms of the point that was raised around environmental sustainability, and when we had rural exceptions, we tended to look at things like kind of passive houses and covered in solar panels and so on. Well, this is quite interesting because I think this is very modern design in that it's a traditional house type, but it's completely powered by air source heat pumps. And I think the technology has moved on. So now you don't have to make it look like a bunker covered in solar panels. You can still get the sustainability and bring some of the more traditional design conceits to play. However, in terms of delivering what we could deliver, I think from the papers we've got the with the help of Historic England and the Conservation Officer, we have covered and addressed all of the issues pertaining to the scheduled ancient monuments to the contentment of Historic England. However, in terms of the landscape restoration, and this is equally important to my mind, Leeds Castle used to be surrounded by wood pasture. There is now very little. In fact, this block of woodland is the only block of woodland within the area of Leeds Village through to Leeds Castle. So it's really important we get this right. There is a proposal, and this is supported by Historic England, to open up some of the woodland close to the new house, and that was going to be very low key and just remove some of the trees which are there. We need to tie down within a landscape and ecological management plan exactly what that means. If suddenly we're opening up vistas within the woodland, which are kind of mown grass or ground cover or whatever, it will start to have a negative impact, I think, on the setting. So we're not going back to capability brown. This is renaturalized. So I think the landscape and ecological management plan, we need to look at it to make sure it's sensitive in terms of the woodland management for those open vistas of the listed buildings, so that it is naturalistic. It can be open but naturalistic. And in terms of the field, the arable field, which is going to be rewilded in Mr. Jarman's words, I think we really do need to tie down exactly what that comprises. We need the right kinds of trees put in there. We need proper parkland trees, and that needs to be appropriately conditioned. And we need to put the water back into it. We need to put the ponds into it. The ponds are shown on the illustrative drawings, but I haven't found anything in writing to say it's specifically going there. So somehow we need to tie down and condition. We get proper parkland trees within the rewilded area. We get open water in there again. And it used to be there. There's a really nice marshy area by the edge of the wood, and on those soils, if you dug out some holes, you'll get the ponds back. So I think there's a real opportunity. So with that tightening up on the landscape and ecological management, I am happy that we grant permission as per the papers with that one small change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Before I ask if you have a seconder, I know that, oh, you have, okay. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Okay. Councillor Garton and then Councillor Perry.
I'm a bit surprised about the elaborations of Councillor Harwood, who apparently knows this site so well. I can only remember a long time before I became councillor, when my son was about 4, he's now 19. We actually played on the village playground and then sort of ventured into those woodlands and were actually trespassing on private land. And this beautiful little pond inside the woodland really struck me hard. And I see now this red boundary line there of the new development taken up half of the new pond, which was absolutely enclosed in beautiful little woodland. I can't believe it that we're even contemplating of preserving some, as Mr. Saunders I think said, some old sheds, some heritage assets, by sacrificing this biological area. I can't see any ecological benefit at all there. So I'm very, very surprised. I'm very much taken heed of what Mr. Saunders said earlier on. Obviously, access rights is a private matter. It's not a planning consideration. But besides that, I fully would like it to endorse what the first speaker said this evening.
It's worth coming back that the pond is not going, it's within the red line part of the pond, but the pond is actually being restored. Currently, the pond is so silted, a duck can walk across it. I mean, there is a little bit of work that needs to be done on it, but none of the pond is being damaged. The ecological value of the pond will be significantly increased by this application. I don't know if the officers can come back on that.
Yeah, the like Councillor Harwood said, the pond would remain. The red line plan, as we call it, is just to identify where the site is. It's not the development area. Part of the development, a detailed part of it, Will has up on the screen now.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. I want to come back very quickly.
Just a question to Mr. Jarman on the, I think the slide beforehand where we have the whole site. Can you actually point? No, that slide. Could you point out with a finger or something, or with a mouse, where the new building will actually go and where any structural development will cease in relation to the pond?
Yeah, so it's to the west of the pond.
So the pond is.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you see, Councillor Garton, the proposed detached? Yeah. Sorry, where Will is pointing to now. That area. To the, as I said, to the west.
Does that satisfy your concerns, Councillor Garton?
Well, it's obviously all a little bit difficult to compare Google Maps current pictures with what is proposed. Do we have absolute assurances that what is, I think Councillor English just said, derelict industrial site there, that we're not exceeding that as far as the development is concerned, as far as hard standing and concrete building is concerned?
Just confirm that to Councillor Garton.
Yeah, sorry, but we can confirm the exact distance, but we think there's a distance of about at least 50 metres, probably closer to 100 metres between the proposed house and the pond.
Right, I think that sorts that particular issue. Councillor Perry and then Councillor Gooch. And do you want to come back again, Councillor Howard? But let me have let me hear from
wanted to come back on the specific point. There is some real confusion from colleagues as to where the proposed house is meant to go. And I think that is absolutely fundamental. I don't know if it's worth the case officer perhaps standing up with that map so people can see it and literally pointing to where the house will go, because I think there's a feeling it's on the wrong side of the scheduled monuments.
We need to move on. Is that issue now sorted? Are members all clear where this pond is? Good. Okay, Councillor Perry and then Councillor Gooch.
Yes, I've almost forgot what I was going to say. Sorry. Let me just come back to some basics here, because we've been very much down in the detail. I've sat on this committee quite a long time. One of the things I've learned is that SP17, which is what it is currently, always has a sort of quasi-religious conviction in terms of its defence. And yet, when I read this, and this is why I'm so puzzled by it, we are proposing to build a 6-bedroom massive semi-palace, a pastiche of a Queen Anne house. I know it may be modern, it may have all the gizmos, but it's still a pastiche house. I'm not sure that is needed, and in style of Leeds itself. So I am concerned about that. And then adding to that, we've got 2 more houses. So this is a development in the open countryside, and it contravenes SP17. However, there are always exceptions, and we know there are some. But the exception here seems to be the benefits for improving or restoring, or whatever you want to call it, renovating a national monument. Now, I don't know if it's a national monument, who is actually responsible for this? Because it seems to me there's 2 different issues here. We're developing in the open countryside, and yet we need to restore a national monument. So that is cited in the report, is probably the principal benefits that outweighs the development in the open countryside. And that puzzles me, to be perfectly honest, and seems to be a complete lack of consistency, because I don't know what guarantees do we have that this will ever be properly restored? Do we know? I suspect we don't, and who is actually responsible if this is a so-called national monument? So I have real issues and problems with this, I have to say, and I still haven't been convinced about the proposal to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Can I come to Councillor Gooch, and then, unless you're happy for Councillor English to go first, Councillor English and then Councillor Gooch. Okay.
Right. Those are legitimate questions. However, they are covered in the report. It states quite clearly that the head of terms in the section 106 to ensure that we do not just end up granting planning permission and do not get the restoration, which I think is Councillor Perry's concern, is that payment of a financial bond to fully cover the heritage assets being restored and safeguarded in accordance with the timetable to be agreed. And there are a number of other heads of terms, including the approved management plan for the biodiversity improvements and so on. This is on page 48, if you're looking for it, Councillor Perry. Now, the fact of the matter is that we don't often come across a situation where we've got 3 scheduled national monuments. And yet, in order to answer the question of whose responsibility is it, it's our responsibility as the local planning authority to try and ensure that those are dealt with and that they are taken off the at-risk register, right? It's our responsibility as the planning authority. There's not some national organisation that will take this off our hands. What we do have is a national heritage consultee which has been consulted and would like us to proceed with this. We have Kent County Council have been consulted on the biodiversity, who quite clearly would like us to proceed with this. What we have is a question of balance here. There could quite easily be a less attractive scheme come forward without some of the biodiversity gains and without some of the nice features in the new manor house, which I actually think may be a pastiche or not, but pastiche isn't always bad. Depends how you do it. We could easily come forward with a considerable number of modern dwellings just to restore, and more of them, just to secure the restoration of the 3 scheduled monuments in themselves without any further works, because that is basically what the planning requirement would be if we ended up weighing this before an inspector. But this is an attempt by our planning officers and conservation officers to balance these things in a reasonable manner. I do also find it, I do hope we will also be consistent this evening, and if we're going to say that we're not going to count the changed circumstances of the adopted local plan, that we take that line with all our planning applications this evening, because they have implications with other planning applications on this agenda. So if we decide that isn't a significant material change in planning circumstances, we better be able to discriminate between the applications on this agenda, why one is and one isn't. So I would say that we've got to be very careful that in order to seek the perfect situation and outcome here, we don't throw away a very good one and end up with a much worse situation coming forward, because we've been there before on other sides.
Thank you, Councillor English. I'll just come to Councillor Gooch, and then we have Perry and Garton coming back. Councillor Gooch, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Before I come forward with the points I'd like to raise, could you please refresh my memory, notwithstanding that highways don't object to anything, can you just refresh my memory in that the accesses will be improved? Because I really still am concerned about the access for the farmhouse, for Abbey Farmhouse, and I just would like clarification that the accesses for both properties, whatever the legal requirements are, will still be secure. Can somebody just say that? Was the access going to be improved? All I need is a yes.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you. I'm sorry, but I missed apparently there was a pre-app meeting and I missed that, and so I'm a bit without. The points I'd like to raise, I've seen throughout that there is everything hangs on 30 years. Why can't the time limits be in perpetuity? I've noted that for example, on the heads of terms on page 48, improvement of the land for a minimum of 30-year period. And it's also quoted throughout the conditions, perpetuity, condition 19, retained thereafter for at least 30 years. Please, can we say in perpetuity? It has been done on the County Council application for the woodlands, for Gallagher Quarry, for example, restoration. Why can't we do it here? Because this is really important.
In terms of the Environment Act, I think it's 2021, that's commencing in installments, as it were. And I think I might have got my dates wrong. In early February, biodiversity net gain kicked in for what we class as major applications. So that's for residential, that's 10 and over. And that specifically refers to a minimum of a 30-year period. So we are aligned with that.
Oh, so in other words, it's standard speak.
It's because,
Sorry.
Before the BNG, as I call it, biodiversity net gain legislation came out, you'd have a group of lawyers arguing, what does perpetuity mean? A million years, 10 years, 50 years? Well, in BNG legislation, which is part of the Environment Act 2021, it's clearly set out that it has to be a minimum 30 years.
Thank you very much. I didn't realise that, and I appreciate the explanation. Thank you. Hence the 30 years in the doings. Thank you very much indeed. I think I was a bit disappointed in the number of visits that the public can make, and watching briefs by academia, for example, that could be by appointment. I think we've only got a minimum of a couple of days. Can't we make that more? It seems very tight-fisted for such an important, this is a huge opportunity. And may I just say, I thought the officer had really set out comprehensively and thoroughly why this is such an enormous departure for something that we would normally do. There ain't no policy for this thing, basically. So I would have expected there to be more public benefit. Could we increase that as part of the conditions, please? And I've got one more question after that.
Obviously, there's a possibility. Yes, it'd be good to get an indication of how much more by.
Be done with an informative, because I think that time came out as a discussion, and it could be raised as an informative that people want to do more days. Yeah,
I'd be happy as long as there's something in there to increase the public benefit. Thank you very much. And I think I would just like some kind of reassurance about how the legal financial framework will tie in with the timing of the planning permission. They've got to start it within 3 years. So I assume that the financial agreement also needs to be tied up within 3 years. I would like to see everything running in parallel. Can that be done?
Yeah, that is the intention, Councillor Gooch. I think Councillor English mentioned that. The management plan is an actual phasing plan to align with restoration. I might have got the sequence wrong. With, I think, the Dovecot first, and then moving on to the Slipe. So that there's a sequence which is aligned with the actual building works. And to be blunt about it, if for whatever reason there's financial difficulties, we put ahead of term with regard to a bond. So if for whatever reason, I hope obviously this doesn't happen, if the applicant became bankrupt, then there would be this financial bond which goes to us, so we can step in and improve the Slipe and the Dovecot.
Thank you very much, because I hadn't twigged that. So thank you. And finally, may I just ask about the long-term monitoring? Will it be in somebody's diary to check it out every 5 years or something like that?
Sorry to keep coming back. The answer is yes, but it'd be less than 5 years. Yeah.
Very much.
And again, that's in another management plan.
No, that's fine, as long as it's there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. And Councillor Perry, I think you wanted to come back.
Yeah, I was looking at the heads of terms again, and looking at the infinite richness of the English language, I see that the words "as soon as practicable" that's about as open-ended as you can blinking well get in the English language, with due respect. It doesn't mean a damn thing. And excuse my language, I apologise. But it doesn't. That is so open, and there's nothing in here about the quality either. I mean, there's restoration and restoration. I've seen a few hack jobs in my time, and I know damn well that not necessarily going to work. So I'm not very happy. I don't think these heads of terms meet the purpose at all. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was talking to Chairman Councillor Perry. The detail will be in the management plan in relation to your second point. I'm afraid to say maybe we could use other language, but we can't be specific on the first head, simply because I think Councillor Gooch raised this. We can't force an applicant to start the development next August or whenever. It's just a society we live in. So that's why we've got that wording.
Right, thank you.
But what once with the if and when the development is started, then the applicant is locked into doing certain things, like I said when I responded to Councillor Gooch. And if in a worst case scenario, if for whatever the applicant goes bankrupt, there's this money to make good what has been promised in this application before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. I had Councillor Cox and then Councillor Cox, Perry, and then Eagle. Oh, were you before him? I'm sorry. Okay. Councillor Garton, Cox, and Eagle.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I basically just wanted to put my finger exactly in the same hornet's nest as Councillor Gooch just said. I've been living in that ward now for over 20 years. I never knew that there was a national heritage asset in that ward. Now we are having a massive development there to protect national heritage assets. And these are to be visited on 2 days per year for the next 30 years. That's 60 days this site would be open. And if we then put the 2 days on Christmas Day and New Year's Eve, I think we have no visitors whatsoever. I think we need to certainly extend the time of visiting 2 days per month or 2 days every 2 months throughout the year, that the site actually becomes available to the public.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Councillor Cox and then Councillor Eagle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The pre-app briefing was extensive. It was very well delivered. You could get the feeling also from the applicant, the owners, and their passion and what they were setting out. I think if they can open such a vast site to the public in a way, they will find out that they want to, because they're proud of what they have here. And they could have gone a lot of different ways to achieve what they want to do. And if they do carry out the building that is before us in the correct way, with the correct old methods of building, but putting in the technology, then I think what we will have will be an exemplar. I hope it is, and I'm sure it will be. But please, go to the pre-app briefings, because it is very extensively set out. We saw a lot more detail, and I think there was a lot more input, and it was a more relaxed way of asking questions. But thank you very much for the briefing this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Eagle.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still new to this, so and I'm just subbing this evening. I haven't had a chance to look through it thoroughly, and I didn't see the pre-app. But the conservation area, there's 2 conservation areas. I couldn't quite make out what's happening there. Does this fall in between the 2 conservation areas?
Essentially. Does that sort you out, Councillor Eagle? Yep, good. Okay. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Just picking up the point on the pre-app things. Some of us we work full time, so we can't actually make the pre-app. So maybe some consideration needs to be given to that. Or indeed, I'm hoping that everything that I need to make my decision on is within this report, which I have read cover to cover. I think my main concern here is that the condition of all of these things is very bad. They seem to be falling down. They've got vegetation growing throughout. I really do hope that someone will be able to take that brick by brick and rebuild it all. But by the time you have rebuilt all of that, to the extent that it would seem that you need to rebuild it, and then build the massive mansion without regard for the other heritage assets in the vicinity and their setting, I do have concerns that you will be doing a little Disneyland of what you think this should all look like, with a mega mansion also in the grounds. And that is really my concerns, and nothing that anyone has said tonight has really allayed those for me, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. We'll just go to Councillor Garton, and then we must take it to the vote. So we've had a long debate on this one. Councillor Garton.
The pre-app meetings. I mean, they should not only be scheduled accessible for councillors who have a job, but Councillor Perry, Councillor Russell, and myself had informal cabinet on the day when the pre-app was held.
Right, thank you, Councillor Garton. A proposal has been made by Councillor Harwood. I think it was to propose as per the papers and the urgent update. Plus, there was some other issues.
Yeah, it was just sorry, Chairman, through you. It was just tightening up on some of the landscape restoration issues, making sure that within the arable reversion field that we actually condition native parkland trees and some wetland features, ponds going back into the site. And it was literally to get that down in writing, because currently it talks about a broad brush management for the next 30 years. It doesn't talk about the components. There's just an illustrative map, and I think we need to get that in writing.
There was also the informative that Councillor Gooch mentioned.
Oh yeah, about asking whether more days could potentially be offered for public and interested parties to visit the elements of the site.
Got the informative, and I'd ask for delegated powers to reflect what you've just said, Councillor Harwood, in a revised condition 16 and the penultimate bullet point in terms of heads of terms, which both relate to
and sorry, Mr. Jarman, through you, Chairman, and you captured the element about in the landscape management plan. It talks about opening up some sections of the woodland between the new house and the scheduled monuments. It was around doing that in a way that's sensitive to the ecology of the woodland.
If it's okay with people, we could run a draft past certain councillors.
Yes, I don't see why that can't be agreed between all councillors and the chairman and vice chairman of the planning committee. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Harwood?
Absolutely. I'd like a look at it, mate.
Okay. There was also an informative about visiting times, visiting days. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is everybody clear? Are you voting for, Councillor, or are you wanting to speak?
If I may, would Councillors English and Councillors Harwood not only accept an informative to extend the visiting times, but make it a condition?
I think it will be difficult because you have to negotiate that. So an aspiration is fine, but actually conditioning it could be quite difficult and delay the whole thing for quite some time.
Just to support Councillor English, we cannot require it. It's an offer. We can just have a conversation as to whether more access is potentially available.
I think that can only be covered really with an informative, Councillor Garton, and the officers will negotiate the best deal they can get.
Would I be in my rights to move an amendment if I find a seconder to make it a condition?
The problem is it would almost certainly be an unreasonable condition and fail.
As a sort of English compromise, what we could do is try through negotiation of the section 106, the exact wording, we could get an extension of the days and times in that. Sorry.
Presumably, we could have the draft conditions, the 106 agreement, and the informative agreed by ward members and chairman of planning and vice chairman.
Yes.
Does that sort you out?
Yeah. I think Janice wants to.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm that in the management plan, it does set out days for public access and for academic access and pre-arranged access. So there is flexibility within the management plan to alter that. Management plans will go out for consultation as part of the whole process of creating a conservation management plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Gooch. I didn't realise that was you sitting there. So here we are. Thank you very much. Right, members, are you all sort of clear now as to what we are voting for? Okay, so votes in favour of the permission being granted. And against? Abstentions? None. Tally.
Thank you, Chairman. That application was approved with all the changes and the urgent updates and the legal agreement, and it was 7 votes in favour, 5 against and no abstention.
Right, thank you, members. Would you like to have a 5-10 minute comfort break before we press on? Oh. That's 7-5. Oh. Gosh, that was hard work. Well done. Oh. Gosh. Nice to see you. I didn't realise. Right, members, are we all back, ready to carry on? Right, item number 16 on the agenda, land to the east of 26 Douglas Road, Maidstone. I'll ask Mr. Amaker to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin the presentation, I would like to remind members there is a published urgent update in relation to a change in the site address. On page 108, the site address is stated as land to the west of 26 Douglas Road. This was an error. The site address have now been amended to land to the east of 26 Douglas Road. This application involves a change, this application involves demolition of the existing summer house and garage in the side garden to be replaced with a new 4-bedroom detached property with associated parking. The scheme is a resubmission of a previous application that was refused and dismissed at appeal. On your screen is the site location plan showing the existing building. The existing garage is on the application site, and then a listed building to the east of the site. So St. Mary's Church of England Infant School is located immediately to the west of number 28 Douglas Road, which is over here. The rear boundary of the application site is shared with a section of the site curtilage of number 5 Hever Gardens. Hever Lodge is a great 2 listed building to the east that I guess spoke about. This is the proposed site layout plan. So you can see the existing site layout with the existing garage and summer house. And then next to it is the proposed site plan showing the new dwelling. As you can see from this slide, the current scheme, which is the one below, adopts a more traditional approach as compared with the previous refused application, which was much modern design. The reach of this previous refused application was 7.8 meters above ground level, and the range of the currently proposed scheme is 6.9 meters, representing a reduction of 0.8 meters. The separation distances between the existing dwelling and the dwelling that was refused in the previous application is 0.9 meters. The separation distances between the current scheme and the existing dwelling is 1.2 meters, representing an increase of 0.3 meters. The main conclusions of the inspector in the previous appeal were that the development would have an unacceptable impact on outlook from the first floor bedroom windows of number 26 Douglas Road, mainly due to the height and proximity of the blank side wall and roof of the new building. So this is a plan showing how the changes have impacted on light to the existing first floor bedrooms. As indicated in the report, the identified fundamental defect in the previous schemes is addressed by the reduction in height, which I mentioned previously, and reduction in height of the region eaves of the new dwelling, and then the increase in the separation distances between the existing house and the house in this current scheme. Officers are satisfied. The revised scheme now provides adequate outlook from these two first floor windows on the side elevation of the existing dwelling. The proposal would comply with all relevant requirements of the local plan and the MPPF. The officer recommendation is to approve.
Right, thank you, Mr. Amaker. We have 3 speakers this evening. First one is Mr. Osborne. You'd like to come forward? I'm sure you know what to do.
On this section of the house. So this showing the ground floor, this showing the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and officers of the council. Good evening. There's not much more I can add to the papers that you already have in front of you. The report produced by Mr. Amaker, I think, is very well structured and puts everything into context. The site is a gap in an otherwise built up frontage. It's within an urban area of Maidstone. It's highly sustainable. We have tempered the visual appearance so that it's more traditional and in keeping with the prevailing character of the street scene. And we have reduced the height, reduced the width from the previous scheme. And as Mr. Amaker has highlighted, the matter of outlook, which was the reason for the refusal through appeal, has been overcome with the redesign. So I believe that this is a policy compliance scheme. It is appropriate. And then when weighing up the planning balance, that the benefits of a home in this location outweighs the harm, and one additional home within the sustainable urban area of Maidstone will hopefully reduce the use of a greenfield site somewhere else for another home. So I don't have anything further to add, and I trust that you'll find the scheme to be suitable for support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Thank you for coming along this evening. Now, Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. Douglas Road, as most people here will be aware of, is a major through road with 2 schools on it, an infant school and a junior school. It's also a major entry route into the Fant area, as well as a bus route and a classic rat run, as personified by the chaos residents have suffered in the last fortnight for closure of Tunbridge Road. This proposal represents overdevelopment of the site in its context. Douglas Road is in a residents' parking zone. Speak to any of the residents in the road and they will tell you the daily nightmare of parking. The site plan with the application demonstrates that the new unit will have 2 parking spaces, but the existing house will have no parking spaces. Therefore, there's a reduction overall in off-street parking because currently the current house has 4 spaces plus a garage. And we're replacing that with 2 houses with only 2 spaces. I urge you, if nothing else tonight, to request that the council urgently reviews its parking standards to match the reality of the living world, not some planning database. The proposal is unsustainable in terms of its environmental impact. No cycle parking for the 2 houses has been demonstrated. It may be a planning condition. The house, although it's obviously has been shrunk, and it does not fit well with the existing street scene. If you look on paragraph 610, it looks like a doll's house squeezed between 2 existing properties. And the impact on the wider area is not considered. This application has caused considerable level of local concern. This is not necessarily reflected in the objections you received, as the residents of Fant are sick of objecting to proposals which wreck their environment when whatever they say, they're almost inevitably passed. There's a massive level of scepticism in that local community, and I am frequently having to reassure residents that the planning process in Maidstone is not a developer's charter, but I'm afraid people no longer believe that when they see the evidence of their own eyes. I just ask you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Coates, would you like to come forward for your 3 minutes?
I concur everything Mr. Councillor Harper has said on this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Right, I have Councillor English who wants to speak first.
We have been here before, and that is why we already, as a committee, when we were looking at the outcome of some other applications and some applications in front of us in the urban area, have already written to the Cabinet member following a unanimous vote of this committee to request that the evidential work be done to carry out a review of policy in relation to parking standards in the urban area. Something in my view is long overdue, but this committee has grasped that nettle and is carrying out or doing everything it can in its power to move that forward as quickly as possible. However, returning to this specific application, we do not yet have those parking standards, and the work will take time. At least we've made a start, but it will take time. We have had a number of recent appeal decisions where we have refused applications on the basis of lack of adequate parking. And because we do not have that standard and the work is yet to be done, although I hope it will start soon, we cannot defend any refusal. Even more to the point, on this specific application, it wasn't actually a ground of refusal in the application that went to appeal. So we have a recent appeal decision in which the grounds for appeal of the previous application were partially upheld and partially rejected. The design ground was rejected, and on the because it said that the pattern of built development in that area, I paraphrase, not exact quotation, was mixed heterodox, and therefore it was difficult to substantiate a design ground for refusal. It did say that there was a problem with the outlook, and that ground for refusal was upheld rightly, in my view, and I think the original refusal was quite correct, because that has been vindicated by the inspector. What we have is an application that has been revised to deal with that specific ground for refusal. It's also had a number of other improvements, in my opinion, which the case officer outlined in relation to the ridge line and so on. Given those very specific circumstances and the general context, there is absolutely no point trying to substantiate a refusal on this application, because we can't. Because there is an extant appeal decision, and the very specific ground in which the the refusal was upheld at that very recent hearing has been addressed. So I therefore move the recommendation on the papers.
Are you seconding that, Mr. Kemp? Does anybody else wish to? Oh, Councillor Russell.
Oh, I was just going to second Councillor English. I didn't know.
Councillor McKenna beat you to it.
Nothing further to add. Councillor English has said absolutely everything, and I concur with everything he said.
Okay, Councillor Garton, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please. I see the inspector's report at 6.54 regarding parking. However, the inspector only was concerned with the new parking arising from the property. What wasn't addressed is actually the loss of a parking space for number 26, which can no longer be accessed. So we are not only talking here about net loss of one parking space, but also the non-availability of a future needed parking space. That's only a point I'd like to raise.
I think the issue there, Councillor Garton, was that was not a reason of refusal for the previous application. It would be impossible for us to start imposing it now. Councillor McKenna?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that. We've only got to look at some of the HMO ones that we've lost recently on the grounds of parking. You know, that's why we're doing the work to resolve that. So yeah, it's yeah, hopefully in the future we'll have that in our arsenal, but I don't think so in this one.
Good stuff. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Councillor Garton, will you come back again?
Yeah, just looking at the street view picture, I mean, at the moment, we've got in front of that driveway a yellow line. Would there be any issue to remove the yellow line and make it an on-street parking space? Because we no longer need the access to that yard. Could that be implemented as part of the decision?
That is entirely up to the owner.
Could we add that as an informative?
Okay, we can have an informative on that, but I don't know. Okay, if the proposer and seconder are wishing to take that on.
It's
board.
really an issue for parking services to be looking at rather than planning. But if we want to ask parking services to look at that, I don't really have a great objection.
On the street parking.
Yeah, just ask Jeff Kitson. Does
Yeah, I mean, that
the
is something
relevant-
that have to be investigated.
Yeah.
Councillor Eagle?
Thank you. I just rushed through this one again. Sorry about that. I can't see anything with renewable energy on here. Is there any indication of anything in that area? Was it? Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. So been proposed, been seconded as per the papers with an informative to investigate the possibility of an off-site parking space subject to the views of the parking services manager. Right, good. Okay, on that basis, votes in favour? Thank you, members. I think that is unanimous. 12 out of 12. Thank you. Right, item 17 on the agenda, land to the rear of 18 to 20 Hartnup Street. Once again, Mr. Amica, you can produce your report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to an L-shaped backland plot located to the rear of the residential block at number 18 to 20 Hartnup Street. The scheme entails construction of a 3-bedroom detached bungalow with associated parking. The dwelling has an L-shaped footprint and would be constructed of red brick. The existing character of the area includes backland residential development, as shown on this plan, the plan on your screen. As you can see, there are existing dwellings shaded in orange behind houses fronting Hartnup Street. So the proposed bungalow is similar in design to these existing properties in terms of scale, height, and height. The proposed bungalow sits comfortably on the site with good sized rear garden and off-street parking, as is shown on this plan. So that is the 2 parking spaces provided for future occupiers of the house. So this plan shows the proposed elevation of the bungalow. This shows that the proposal retains sufficient garden space for the existing dwellings, as set out in the report, maintains acceptable residential amenity with all neighboring properties. The proposal provides adequate car parking as well, as indicated on the plans that I previously showed on the screen. This current plan shows the separation distances between the new dwelling and all the existing dwellings. So as you can see on that plan, the separation distance to number 255, which is the closest dwelling, is 23.8 meters. And then the separation distances to the dwellings, the other dwellings, is between 39 and 48 meters. The closest dwelling is number 18 to 20 Hartnop Street, and the separation distances, it's in the range of about 24 meters from the new house. The scheme includes biodiversity enhancement, which is shown on this plan. This includes a bed box, a bee hotel, and a log pile. This enhancement would be secured by a planning condition. The proposal complies with all relevant policies of the local plan and the MPPF. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Amaker. Councillor Harper, would you like to come forward and do your stuff again?
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to hear that the parking standards are currently being reviewed and updated. I think that may help similar applications such as this and some of the other issues we suffer from in FAMP the whole time being addressed in the future. So I just wish they get done as speedily as possible in conjunction with a review of our HMO standards. But getting back to this one, Hart Street is a very busy and congested road, suffering from the effects of, over a long time, decisions made in terms of planning applications. It is a major rat run for traffic, avoiding the Fountain and Queens Road junctions. And it suffers a constant flow of traffic, but it also has the impact virtually opposite the application site of a MOT servicing garage and other associated units on a small industrial estate, that is being accessed the whole time with cars from the MOT station frequently parked in the road. Now, Beckland Development, just because there are 3 other back garden bungalows in that area, does not mean that really further back garden development should be encouraged, because that just represents a continual erosion. If you've got 3, you can have 4, you can have 5, you can have 6. So you get to a situation where there's virtually no back gardens left in that triangle of property, if you're not careful, just for a slow erosion. The application has, as I said, similar to the last one, caused concern from residents. Patrick and I were only down Hartnop Street a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people are heavily concerned, but again, they just feel that if they put comments forward, they're just not listened to. So they've just given up the planning process. The one issue is really the access to the Hartnop Street. I don't think that's safe and sound. As I say, it's right opposite the entrance to a very busy commercial estate, which is in use from very early in the morning until late at night. the narrowness of the entrance to that site. Also, I would ask how emergency services going to be able to turn from what is a narrow road into a very narrow access track to get to that house. If you ever needed a fire engine or an ambulance or anything else, short of them being able to do a 4 or 5 point turn, they would not be able to get into it. The site, the area is just so tight. We are told again that the bungalow, well, it's a car parking standards, which we've discussed. So, I mean, basically, I would just urge you to reject this application. I think the issue of access is just unsound and unsafe, and I think could give problems in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Right, does anybody wish to? Oh, sorry, Councillor Coates. Sorry.
I won't be needing 3 minutes. I urge you to do the right thing and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Thank you for coming this evening. I think, so you indicated that Councillor Garton was first. Okay, Councillor Garton, then Councillor English, then Councillor Holwood.
A quick question to Mr. Jarman, if I may. I believe they are now under the NPPF minimum floor space requirements for new developments. Are there actually minimum floor space requirements for rooms rather than for premises in total? I find some of the rooms in this outlay in the floor plan rather minute. I mean, as a studio flat, I would certainly want to pass it, but as a 3-bedroom house, I think it's really pushing the margin here.
Yeah, it's for the whole unit, not for the, as far as planning is concerned, it's not for the room size.
Thank you, Mr. John. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Garton? Good. Okay, Councillor English, then Councillor Holwood.
I hear what Councillor Harper says and the brief but to the point comments of Councillor Coates. The difficulty is we've essentially got an access there already because there are 3 garages there. So that's the problem. We've got an established access. So saying it's not safe is going to be quite difficult because there's an established access there already. It is more of a question, the question of whether emergency vehicles could access it is probably a better question, given that the waste collection is going to be from the rear of the property. One imagines that the access for emergency vehicles from the main approach road is quite likely to be problematic. So that, but other than that, I don't really see there's a problem with this. When I first got involved in planning, when God was a young man, the backland development was something that was automatically pretty much a no. And since then, however, government planning policy has moved back and forwards and sideways and then sideways again. And we're currently in a position where backland development is not ruled out. In fact, in the urban area, it can often, and in some larger rural settlements, it's almost positively encouraged. So we're on a different ball game. I think that I don't particularly like this application, but I don't really see any particular reason in policy or design terms or access terms, given the 3 garages are already there and it is already an access way, that one could refuse it. My only concern is the one about whether emergency vehicles will be able to access this site in an emergency, because I actually think that might actually be quite difficult, given that we've already said that corporation waste vehicles can't really go in the front.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Harwood and then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in principle, a further erosion of the green space to the rear of these properties is unwelcome. I mean, frankly, we're seeing an intensification of development across the whole of Fant, where every gap is being filled in, and with the challenges around access and egress and parking and all of the other issues, it's making life quite difficult for the existing residents. And also there's issues around air quality and permeability to rainfall. We're certainly not making Fant climate ready. You know, you're seeing, be talking about it later, but all across continental Europe, in overcrowded areas such as this, local authorities are buying up land and knocking down houses to create much needed green space in much poorer countries than the UK. But we've got the planning system we've got, and it's just the way we've got to go. However, I think some of the other issues have been picked up on. I'm not entirely clear on the advice we've had from Highways, because I think Councillor Harper's point on the business units on the other side of Hartnup Street is well made. That's a very busy little cluster of businesses now, particularly on Sundays, at weekends, when people are going to the pet food bit and the bakery and whatever. There's quite a lot of throughput, and there's quite a lot of cars kind of waiting to turn while others come out. So there is a bit of challenge, but because there is existing accesses there, I don't think we can poo-poo it. It's just that I am keen to understand things like turning angles and so on with the parked cars that are there to ensure that we can do it safely. And then the only other issue, which is a point of detail, is that my sister's got a house not far from here, and the back garden, which looks pretty much like the garden that's shown here, to be fair, and it's the front and back garden are absolutely rammed with slow worms, and as a slow worm wriggles, it's really not very far from here. So I think we need to put a precautionary condition that when the area where the unit is cleared, that it's done incrementally. So the brambles are trimmed off first, then the grass is taken down, and anything that is there should move down into the area that's being undeveloped, where the wood piles and things are going. So it may well be worthwhile putting the wood piles and things in at the end of the garden, which is going to be left, just putting some arris fencing or something over there, then progressively clearing and making open the area where the dwellings and where the construction is going to go on, to enable any reptiles protected under Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act to move into safety. And that's what we do on a lot of other sites. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, the condition's fine. In terms of highways, we do not consult Kent Highways on less than 4 residential units, and that's been the case since time immemorial. Lastly, and I'll try and be as quick as possible because I feel that it may be another letter to the cabinet member for planning. I just want to make it very clear, and Councillor English mentioned this earlier. Yeah, for a long time, we used to have a policy resisting backland, and particularly backland tandem development. As Councillor English mentioned, it wasn't always successful at appeal, but nothing is. So maybe we should start thinking about reintroducing that policy in particular parts of Maidstone Borough or the whole of Maidstone Borough. But I'd like to be very frank about this, because I can see us having future conversations about this, is the urban boundary of Maidstone hasn't changed much at all. And it's incumbent on us to think very carefully about where that boundary is. But I have heard people say this: if there's a green space, it's not back garden. It's just a green space. It is classed as what we call white land. So to be blunt about it, it's open to development because it's within that boundary. Different green space in the countryside because it's outside of that boundary. But, you know, if people, you know, and everything's a balance, isn't it? If people want to protect green spaces within the urban area, and this includes within village envelopes as well, then there has to be a special layer of protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. I certainly, Councillor English.
Sorry, what about the access for emergency vehicles, which is the only, you know, I think that is a potential issue if we're saying that waste vehicles can't go down the front.
Well, as I said, we don't consult Kent County Council. One of the primary reasons for that is because obviously one house has a very limited impact, but perhaps more to the point, there's a County of Kent Act to do with access for emergency vehicles, also building control, to an extent deal with emergency access. A lot of the time it's, you know, unfortunately, if there's a fire, hope to God there isn't a fire, it's proximity to the nearest water hydrant and they use the hose pipes.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor English?
Not really, but I thought that would be the answer, but I just thought I'd better inquire
Yeah.
in Ray.
Right, Councillor Cox and then Councillor McKenna.
Thank you very much. To the rear of the property, it says cycle storage. Is that a shed or is that just a rack for cycle storage? And if so, why is it all the way down the back? Because I don't know as you'd park your bike and then go in through the lounge. So why is it not near the bins or near the parking area? Or it just seems a bit strange to put something that you're trying to ask people to use frequently at the back of the house, or is it an existing shed they're going to turn into something? So if you come back first, and if not, can we ask to move it? Because I don't think it's in a very good position.
Well, so looking at the plan, the shed is obviously at the back of the house. According to the report, it would be used for cycle storage. If there is a need for that to be relocated, I don't see any room for that being relocated to any part of the front because of the parking provision there. Well, it's a shed, yes. So the shed, the elevations are shown on the plan on your screen at the moment.
Okay, right. Councillor McKenna.
Yeah, I think we've sort of taken it as far as we can. So I'm sort of happy to propose it, but with Councillor Harper's amendments. I think it's also worth noting, rightly or wrongly so, and I'll say it anyway. It's very evident that Councillor Harper and Councillor Coates really care for their members because they are here month in, month out, regardless of what they know we're going to say. They are here at pretty much every planning meeting. So it's really, really evident that they do care for their members. And I think that should be noted because it sounds like they think they're not listened to. But yeah, I think it's really nice to see. But yeah, with Councillor Harwood's amendment, I'm happy to propose.
I think Councillor Harper and Councillor Coates do a damn good job for their, you know, they're here every time there's anything in fact. Absolutely. One day we may agree with you on something, but it's very, very difficult. We have to take into account the planning considerations, and that sometimes is very, very difficult. But we do appreciate you coming along. Thank you very much. Right, so on that basis, so sorry. Okay, you've just seconded. So you proposed, yeah, you seconded. Have votes, and plus the amendment, which is the construction management plan to look after the slow worms, as wanted by Councillor Harwood. So on that basis, is everybody happy with what they're voting for? Good. Okay, votes in favour. Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Right. We now have one more item to deal with. Mr. Timmins has been very, very patient.
Give an overview. I'll give an overview.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks. Just make some strategic points first. First of all, I think Councillor Russell raised this point earlier this evening. So the adopted local plan review has substantial weight, but like she alluded to, it doesn't have the full weight of the 2017 adopted plan because the judicial review period hasn't elapsed. In fact, it's only just started. However, we as officers are giving more weight to the local plan review that was adopted last night. And the simple reason why that is because in the 2017 adopted plan, this is front and center of our, at the time, proposed mixed use. So I think from memory, it was something like 4,000 square meters of offices and 10,000 square meters of retail floor space. So the council undertook a survey of employment needs and retail needs in 2021. And because that evidence base is 2021, 4 years after the 2017 adopted local plan, that is why we're giving plan that was adopted last night more weight, simply because it's got an up-to-date evidence base. So what the local plan review says now about this site is that a much smaller quantum of retail is required. If I could just park that, the local plan review is concerned with the whole of the site. So that includes Maidstone East itself, because some people refer to this site as Maidstone East, which doesn't make any sense at all because it's the old post office sorting office. So in the local plan review, it's treated as one whole site, and there's a requirement for a master plan. But myself and Richard consider that that was the case, i.e. it was in two separate ownerships when the council started embarking on this new local plan review. So it's just a matter of fact that Network Rail own, and unsurprisingly, a railway station, and we have bought the site next door. So hopefully that deals with master planning. So because we think, if you calculate the areas, it's roughly half of the whole site, if this is making sense. But back to mixed use, and there's two reasons why this is before us tonight. Obviously it's a Maidstone Borough Council application, but secondly, it is contrary to the adopted local plan 2017, because that said it was a mixed use site. So we still need to examine what is proposed in terms of mixed use and look moreover at the new policy, if I can put it that way. So back in 2017, there was a delay of 1 day because the inspector wanted to see more office floor space being allocated in the 2017 local plan. He thought that there was Maidstone needed to provide more employment space. However, the specific reference to office floor space is now gone. It's replaced by what's called Class E, or some people refer to it as town centre uses. So that could be anything from a gym to a creche, it could be almost anything. But the important point is offices have gone. There's no specific reference to that at all. On a positive note, as you can see from your papers, there's been a positive response from the NHS about the possibility of the NHS occupying some of the floor space which is being offered by the applicant. But it could be any of those town centre uses. With retail, there is still a requirement, and we calculated it to be 1,000 square metres of retail. However, that's clearly significantly less than the 10,000 in the adopted local plan. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. We think that is entirely acceptable because, again, at the time of the the examination, Marks and Spencers had officially approached Maidstone Borough Council because it was a retail site about having what ended up being the new Marks and Spencers at next Junction 7 at Eclipse Park at this site. But it's not but. The land was not available for that retail proposal. And then again, more recently, with, I'm sure members will remember, refusing the Aldi application, they've now gone to appeal. They did exactly the same thing because they have to. They have to show that they've done a sequential test. So it's clear to me that the site is not available, certainly for that quantum of retail floor space. However, Richard has negotiated, and this is encapsulated within the condition, that there will be 500 square metres sort of made sacrosanct for retail floor space. That's been negotiated. Viability, again, so they're quite complex issues that we're talking about. So with viability, what's called the NPPG, the National Planning Practice Guidance, that sets out a methodology for doing these what are called viability assessments. That methodology makes no distinction whatsoever between a private company and a local authority. And I think that's important because I think most people would know that they're funded entirely differently. They've got different rules, but the methodology is exactly the same. That's important because the viability assessment submitted by the applicant shows the development to be 50 million in the red, so to speak. We got BNP Paribas to verify that. They think it's 35 million in the red. I don't know who's right, but clearly it's in the red. It sounds counterintuitive, but that doesn't stop a development going ahead because obviously development comes at a cost, and the higher the cost, the more you have to borrow. And I'll come on to that. But so, all applications have to be dealt with consistently. I can't remember the last time we had an application in or around the town centre of any size where it was not accompanied by a viability assessment. In fact, I can, off the top of my head, Len House recently, 0 affordable housing on the back of the viability assessment. Moat Road, I think that was the last time we met. Viability assessment, 0 affordable housing. Ironically, close to 0 commercial floor space as well. However, because we are a local authority, what we can do and what I understand our intention is we will seek full grant funding for affordable housing. And again, that's sort of controlled in the report, in our recommendation. Obviously, we can't guarantee that Homes England will grant us this money, but it's best endeavours. And then lastly, sorry, this is all a bit complex. The new policy, as it were, is very broad brush. And I think that's very important because, you know, if one looks at the NPPF, and developers tell me this every day of the week, they'll say, I have to treat people equally. They'll pick on the NPPF paragraphs that suit them. And I think it was Gove around Christmas time was going back to brownfield land, you know, maximize the use of brownfield land. And that's what developers say. However, and it's good, I think, to have healthy tensions. What the NPPF also says, and what the government recently have been sort of up in the ante on, is good quality design. So there's an entire chapter on building beautiful, as they call it. I think the key point there is, whilst there's lots of sort of positive language around good design, what the government do is that, and they brought out templates for this, I think about 3 years ago, at least 2 years ago. What they require planning authorities to do is to come up with design codes to stop subjective discussions about design taking place so that it can be objectively measured. And the policy does not, for instance, cap heights of buildings. It does not cap built coverage. Myself and Richard, it is a balance here because, you know, certainly configured together, you will see the buildings together. You know, they are of scale, and undoubtedly so. However, there are buildings which are, you know, of scale nearby. Not least opposite is, I think it's called Invicta House. There's yeah, I think Branchley House, if it's still called Branchley House. You know, they are buildings of size. So Richard will speak in more detail.
Yeah, good evening, members. I won't go into too much detail, actually. I think Mr. Jarman's covered it. I'll literally just run briefly through the proposals. So, yeah, it's for 217 flats within 3 main buildings. On the east part of the site where Sandling Road is, you've got Block A, which is 6 to 7 stories. The adjoining Block B, 8 to 9 stories. In the middle of the site, Block E, that's much lower at 3 stories, and then C and D, 7 to 8 stories, and then you've got the Royal Engineers Road to the west. There's also 1,800 square meters of commercial floor space, and that's essentially below blocks A and B. Area of public realm on sort of 2 split levels where the commercial uses are here, and then 2 sort of communal open space areas for residents. And then that's sort of cross sections. Again, we're looking at it right to left, Sanding Road on the right, block A and B connected with a much lower section, the 3-storey units in the middle, and then the C and D on the west, and the Engineers Road is off to the left. Just an aerial image provided by the applicant, so you can sort of see it in 3D if you like. Again, it's the same layout across the site from right to left, and I'll probably leave it here. There's just one sort of image that's provided by the applicant where you're looking from Sessions House. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman and Mr. Timms. I can see as local board member, Councillor Harwood, you're straining at the leash over there to say something.
I am. I've had to. Oh, God.
Good evening, Chair, members, and thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this application. My name is Joshua Meller, Planning Director at Stantec, and I'm the planning agent representing the applicant for these proposals. As the case officer sets out, this planning application seeks approval for the development of 217 new homes, commercial uses, areas of high quality landscape public realm on a highly sustainable town centre brownfield site adjacent to Maidstone East Station. The site is currently underutilised and has been allocated within the now adopted local plan review for redevelopment. And as set out in your officer's report, the proposals accord with this allocation. The application proposals would secure an exemplary design, which is the result of a coordinated multidisciplinary approach. The resulting architectural style responds positively to the local context, whilst creating a new sense of place and delivering high quality new public realm. The scheme has been through extensive pre-application consultation, including 3 pre-application meetings with officers, independent design review, and a pre-application member briefing. Alongside this, 2 public exhibitions took place, advertised by leaflets distributed to 4,400 local addresses. Feedback from all stages, including post-submission feedback from officers and other stakeholders, has positively shaped the scheme before you today. This proactive approach to pre-application consultation alongside the hard work of the applicant and your officers has ensured the proposals have no statutory objections in respect of design, technical, environmental, or any other matters. The proposals would deliver a range of public benefits which support the approval of the application, including the delivery of 217 new homes, assisting in meeting the known need for significant new housing within the town centre, and positively contributing towards maintaining the council's housing land supply on a site which is identified to deliver within the next 5 years. Provision of new flexible commercial floor space which could be used for a variety of uses, including retail provision, new healthcare services, creating a positive active street frontage along Sandling Road, quantified biodiversity net gain in excess of 40% in habitat units above the existing baseline, provision of on-site renewable methods of energy and heat production, including solar PV panels and rooftop air source heat pumps, and around 36% of the site being used for high quality landscaping, including new tree planting, open spaces, public realm, to include attractive new spaces throughout the site, incorporating public parks with areas of play and a split level piazza urban square. The proposals wholly achieve the aspirations of the NPPF and the local plan review in making efficient use of land and promoting positive regeneration in a town centre location. The application would deliver the allocation requirements for the site set out in the now adopted local plan review and set a strong positive framework against which the wider allocation should come forward against. We therefore respectfully ask members of this committee to support the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meller. Thank you for coming along this evening, and I'm grateful for your patience in waiting through 2 hours of other debate. Thank you very much. Right, as I said, Councillor Harwood, you're obviously straining at the leash to say something. I then have Councillor Russell, McKenna and English.
Yeah, the relief, because I've had to bite my tongue about this for the last God knows how many months, and now I can actually say what I think about it. I mean, genuinely, this application gets to the very heart and soul of the vision we have for our town centre. And if this is the vision for our town centre, then I give up. I mean, what other town would Canterbury, Rochester, Tunbridge Wells, right in the centre of town, put tenements like this on rising land? When you come out from the East Station, you'll see the Portland stone of Sessions House in front of you, and you look to the side and you'll have these. As you know, Mr. Jarman, North Ward is the most lacking ward in open space. It fails the accessible natural green standard, space standard by a mile. And yet in this application, there is no usable green space. So we're going to see a huge increase in population. It's 100% private, and you know, Homes England might step in, they might not, I don't know, but it's 100% private. So what's going to happen with this sort of flats? It'll be bought up en masse by another local authority, like the other blocks of flats in this area have, and we will have all sorts of further social issues with children with nowhere to play, nowhere they can go without someone calling the police, nowhere they can go to kick a ball. So what we got here, our green space, is concrete podiums on top of underground car parking, where we know that just down the road at Springfield, I had to report to enforcement today, all the planting on the concrete podiums in the wettest summer we've had in years all died. So I don't fancy its chances in this climate ready development we got here. Perhaps it will create some shade with all the tunnels between the buildings. And I think it's important, this issue around having amenity for people to be able to live and breathe, around livability of towns. And I come back to the point I made earlier around Spain, around France, around the Netherlands, in their urban areas where local authorities are buying up land to clear it of development, to create green space, to make it climate ready and to make it a decent place to live. I'm really, really concerned that the absolute intensification of population load within urban Maidstone is destroying quality of life for the existing residents and for those residents that are moving into the converted office blocks and that are moving into the tower blocks and to the high blocks such as this that we're shoehorning in to every linear little site like this that comes forward. So I think there's a significant issue there around the open space or usable open space. You know, we've got some areas on top of car parks, and we've got a path down the side, and then there's a little stubby bit at the end. That's the open space for the hundreds and hundreds of people who are going to live in here. Back to the affordable housing issue. We approved the worst local plan in the world last night. However, we still have a policy for 30% affordable housing. This does not deliver 1% affordable housing, it delivers 0. It is not policy compliant, and therefore it clearly should be refused. So far, it's failed dismally on usable open space, and our own policies and our old local plan, not the new local plan, the old one, it has failed on by 30% on delivery of affordable housing. As housing colleagues in this report set out, this part of Maidstone has the highest waiting list. It's people in the urban area who don't have a lot of money. It's people in the urban area who need access to services, who need access to sustainable services they can get to. But as you know, and Mr. Jarman knows about this, they commissioned a report in North Ward because we don't have any services whatsoever. And I hear the pipe dream about the NHS are interested. Well, until they've signed the dotted line, I can't agree to anything until there's some sort of a legal agreement that we're actually getting some medical facility here. And then finally, I come on to design and massing. And I think because of the linear nature of the site, this was always going to be a difficult site because of the on the falling land into the Medway Valley. It was always going to be a difficult site. North Ward there's a few taller buildings right down by the river, by the football ground and on the KCC Springfield complex. I wouldn't take any design cues from Brenchley House. if that is the only other big building in this area. You know, the Invicta House was built as commercial unions headquarters, and it's a kind of 1980s office block or whatever, and it looks like it. However, we're talking here about residential. What the main western warp of North Ward is Victorian and Georgian and Edwardian terrace housing with gardens that are low rise. And if you look around the prison, there's miles of it. This does not fit with that at all. I would see this perhaps in parts of southeast London and so on. I do not see it in central Maidstone. So, I mean, I could understand going for high density and going for this massing and blocking if it was delivering lots of affordable housing and half of the site was good open space and play area. On this, we're getting zero affordable housing, we're getting zero open space, we're getting potentially significant issues and impacts it's going to have socially in terms of the fabric of the population in this area from such a massive injection of population, which will likely be, as we know, through different routes for other local authorities. And I think that there are certainly grounds here to refuse this, and I'll wait for debate, but that is what I'm minded to propose with more detail on the grounds that I've indicated. And I do think that the report, I've never seen a report through such rose-tinted spectacles about the fact it's such a spacious development. It's got open space and it's got this and it's got that. It hasn't got anything and it's not policy compliant. Thank you.
Councillor Harwood, Mr. Jarman.
Yeah. Come back on all of those points. What I was trying to do when I spoke earlier on is provide a context. So, as I've said, I do understand the concern if I start with affordable housing. Yeah, quite rightly, in the 2017 adopted local plan, quite clearly says 30% affordable housing. Yeah, I'm putting aside, potential grant for Homes England at the moment, just concentrate on viability. So under the existing policy, even if full council had not adopted the new local plan review, I would say it was commonplace for developers to submit viability assessments to show that zero affordable housing could be provided. And I did give examples, recent examples, where I could continue. It was zero affordable housing at Lane House, which is a very recent decision. That's both a conversion and a new build. Moat Road, which I'm pretty sure was last committee, that is a massive development and absolutely no affordable housing whatsoever, despite, as you said, Councillor Harwood, 30%. So have to be consistent. And I think, in the new world, as I said, full weight can't be given to the LPR because of the JR period. However, that is pretty difficult to tell from the map provided. But this low value zone is very significant. It covers Pennenden Heath. It covers, I think, up to Barming. It goes up to Junction 6. Okay, well, but I'm an officer. I have to work with what this council has agreed. And this council has agreed this very large low value zone, and this is smack bang in the middle of it. I think I'll come back at the end to that. I think Richard needs to go explain in detail the composition of this open space. two more points. Perhaps I have made a mistake. I'm not saying that there's a guarantee whatsoever of the NHS occupying space. All I'm saying is, in the 2017 local plan, it was a genuine mixed use. It was a large quantum of office space and retail space. But now, as I keep saying, the office is completely out of the window, and the wording is town centre uses. So if a creche comes along, if a gym comes along, whatever, that fits in with the specific criteria. You know, that was a decision the councillors made. And then I do think, I think the key issue, but again, there is nothing specific, as I said. Yeah, of course we don't take a design cue from Brenchley House. Of course we don't take a design cue from Invicta House. I don't take a design cue from Guinevere Tower, which absolutely dominates views to the north, dominates the skyline of Maidstone now. However, there are buildings of mass in that area. However, I do agree with you, Councillor Harwood, that if we look at the cross section, you know, blocks B and A will obviously be seen together. That, you know, I do think that is an issue. I think on balance, it is acceptable because I said before, you know, the policy is very broad brush. This takes up roughly half of the whole site. So a binary argument would be 200, and I'm sure developers will say this all the time, 250 units are acceptable here because that's half of 500. That's what it says in the policy. I'm nowhere near as binary as that. And I do think that is an issue, but me and Richard have looked at it carefully, and we think on balance, sorry to keep coming back to on balance, it's just about okay, that massing. I think blocks C and D are acceptable because they're in front of a big dual carriageway, and I think that's quite a harsh environment. There's a lot of what I call horizontal space. To the north is a Stacey Street roundabout, and that, you know, there is an area of green there, so I think that's okay. Yeah, if Richard could just go over the open space point.
Yes, and the area at the front is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's open space as such. It's public realm, you know, where people are using the shops, whatever, a few seats in there. But so I'd say that's more of a public realm that you get in a town. But back into the site, this is a sort of communal space for residents. There will be fairly limited, but some small children's play equipment, seating areas in the centre there, and then a similar but slightly smaller space there. This area is more of, it's a sort of wildflower meadow. So I would say that the spaces are predominantly in the middle and here, and I wouldn't say there's zero space. I think relative to a town centre site, it's fairly good for the residents, not necessarily for the wider public who already live there, but in terms of the residents and a place for them, it is providing two areas.
Right, thank you, Mr. Timms and Mr. Harwood.
Because there'll probably be more than 500 children, but a lot more than that probably. And where are they going to kick a ball about? Where are they going to go? Because there isn't anywhere. They could take their chances in Brenchley Gardens, I suppose, but that's locked up most of the time. I mean, you can smile, but you cannot make people live. That's why we have planning policies. It's to make places livable, and Maidstone is becoming unlivable. When we were younger, Maidstone had far fewer people and far more facilities. Those facilities have all either been built on or things have happened to them. Even the school playing fields have gone. There is no space. And that is why we've got social problems. That's why we've got decline.
Right, shall we move on? I'd like to hear from other councillors. We hear from Councillor Russell, McKenna, and then English. Councillor Russell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling here. Why am I struggling? Because this has got 217 units. Now, it's not opinion that we have made Maidstone Town Centre the most sustainable location in our borough. It was in the old plan, it is in the new plan. That is where the bulk of the development should be directed. That's not opinion, that's fact. This is a brownfield site. Again, not opinion, that's fact. So we have a brownfield site in the most sustainable location in our borough, providing 217 houses. Now, you will take a moment to think where you're from, or the wards around you, or the extremities of the borough, how land hungry 217 units will be elsewhere. So we have 217 units in the most sustainable location on a brownfield site, right next to the railway. How many times have railways been used to justify development? How many times have they been used to say, oh, that rural service centre's got a railway? Brilliant. Now, the local plan's not perfect, but it's through. But you know the allocations that were all across the borough on greenfield sites. Every government, ours, the next one, all of them, they all say brownfield first. If we don't adopt a policy of brownfield first, what are we saying to the whole of the borough? Not just North Ward residents, but the whole of the borough. So now moving on, we've got this location. It is offering 48% net biodiversity gain. We've got 20% in our policy. Well, I'm reading off the papers, so I'm really not having a discussion. I'm actually just saying my own points. So we've got 48% net biodiversity gain in a town centre location. Without the net biodiversity gain, we've got Brenchley Gardens, which has been mentioned. We've got Moat Park. We've got the energy. We've got 36% of the site that's landscaping. Now, I'm just speaking for normal people as well. When I read what normal people are saying, they're saying they can't get access to a doctor's. We're trying to give a space for a doctor's to come. They might not come. They might not come anywhere that we build it, but they are trying to do it on this development. So that is good. I know that it's not perfect. I get that. And I do take on board some of Councillor Harwood's points, but I do always come back to it's a brownfield location in the most sustainable place in our borough. But I would welcome other points and I'm open to the discussion, and who knows, I may change my mind.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got lots of notes scribbled down. I think Rob and Richard have contextualised this in the best way that they can. But I cannot and simply will not support a development of 217 homes without a single affordable house. You can have whatever argument you like, but we're the applicant. What kind of visuals is that saying to our residents? Now, normal people, they want houses they can afford. That's what they want. I cannot support a development where we are not putting affordable houses. It just simply doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for our residents. I take on some of the other comments, but if 217 places were put in myself and Councillor Wilkinson's ward, it would mean 217 affordable houses, not one single affordable property. What are we saying to our residents that we're the applicant, we're building this and we're not building one single affordable home? I'm absolutely flabbergasted that we could even be in that position to even suggest that. I understand the viability, but if it's not viable, don't build it. And it needs to be built with affordable homes, no matter what. That is one of our number one concerns, especially, in the financial times we find ourselves with. And that's genuine affordable homes for normal people. I understand the design and the elements that you're saying, good quality design. That sounds really expensive to me. That doesn't sound like good quality homes for the hard-working people of Maidstone and affordable balance. 30% should be the minimum we look at. That's just my view.
Thank you, Michaela. Mr. Jarman, and then Councillor English.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. It's quite difficult for us because the applicant is the council, and I'm a professional planning officer, but I also work for Maidstone Borough Council. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, but my understanding is that this council's principal aim is the delivery of 1,000 affordable housing. Didn't think I'd be saying this because I'm a planning officer, but this council, as I understand, has taken the decision to make the delivery, choose my words carefully, of 1,000 affordable housing has been its #1 priority, I think. My understanding is also, and this particular proposal has been discussed with councillors for, I think, at least 4 years. So I'm quite surprised actually at some of the comments. I totally get the opposition, particularly on things like scale and massing. I get that, but as I understand it, I'm not the applicant. It is open to anybody to use viability. And as I keep saying, people have in this borough. In fact, as I said, I can't remember the last time that a developer didn't use a viability argument in Maidstone Town Centre. And to compound that, in the document you adopted last night, there's this very large low value area. So I don't quite get that. But secondly, I'm not a housing officer, but for example, perhaps I shouldn't mention it, Loader Close in Lenham. The developer found it difficult, and it was a private developer, found it difficult to provide 40%, because it was in the rural area, affordable housing. So they made the choice, because this is how Homes England work. The developer in that case, and I think we've discussed it many a time in this chamber, the developer chose, and he wasn't the first one, I'm sure it won't be the last one, to flip it over, that's the terminology developers use, to 100% affordable housing. Why did he do that? That's the only way you can get grant money from Homes England. Private developers, or some of them, the Taylor Wimpey's of this world, sorry, I'm probably breaking some rules by mentioning housing companies, volume house builders can provide 40%, 30%, because they have different funding streams. They can get money from, so-and-so bank. I won't go on, but councils, their funding stream is completely different. The main funding stream, and perhaps the only funding stream I know of, is to get full grant from Homes England. And the gateway to getting a full grant is to go over to 100% affordable housing. And that is why in the, I think it's again, because it's a council application, it's not a section 106. In the memorandum of understanding, we tried to lock in the council to go for 100% affordable housing so that they can get the grant from Homes England. Hopefully that answers your question, Lewis.
So it's chicken and egg then, in that scenario.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. If leaving aside the viability, which is a big thing to leave aside, they would not be able, sorry, the council would not be able to get this grant from Homes England because it would be 30% or whatever the percentage is. It's not 100%.
Some interesting issues there. Councillor English and then Councillor Garton. Oh, Councillor Cox.
Right. First, let's kill one thing. There has been precisely one pre-application discussion with members who are not in the cabinet. So there's an idea that there's been large-scale consultation with board members and the public is just not true. Secondly, at no time were councillors in general advised of the retail interest by various companies in this property, nor were we advised that those retail companies have been told to sling their hook for whatever reasons. We've seen it before. There was a recommendation from committees in this council to have a supermarket on a site, Morrison Supermarket at Springfield, which was systematically undermined, and it never happened. There's been a long-standing demand for this. Frankly, the way process we've ended up with arriving at this point is at best murky and non-transparent, at worst questionable. In terms of the design of this building, as a council, we should be doing better than just good enough, which in design terms, this is not a good design, and it does take its cue more from Brenchley House than from any other building. There are tall buildings some distance away, but they are built in lower ground in a depression, so the effect is less. This is on a fairly prominent bit of land. So the council really should be doing better than a design which is frankly just about good enough. Let's talk about the net biodiversity gain. There really isn't. On paper, because of the way it's presented, yes, on paper there is a net biodiversity gain. What you're going to have here is, as we've had at some of the sites that have been developed in Springfield, some very vulnerable planting which could easily be destroyed or die. And you have a layout, a landscape layout, that is an antisocial behaviour problem waiting to happen. We've already got significant antisocial behaviour problems at the top of Week Street, arising principally from Brenchley House. Now we are looking at a site which will invite it, not necessarily from the people living there, but from the people who'll probably be fine, but the people who are already in the area and already have caused major antisocial behaviour problems. With this layout, we are tempting a massive extension of that. So if we are going to do this, we need to look at extending our public spaces protection order and all sorts of things to make sure that doesn't happen, because it will happen. Now, then we've got a situation where we're going to have some tiddly little bits of children's play equipment for younger children, no doubt. Now, there are some parks in the vicinity, but none of them are children's play areas. Brenchley Gardens is not a park with children's play equipment. It is an ornamental landscape garden. The next nearest park is Holy Trinity, which again is not a children's play area. It's effectively a wildlife park in the urban area. So we are basically building in, and ball games are essentially not permitted in that part. We are building in a slum which will be a constant weight to the council's reputation. We should be doing better than this. I'm not saying that the principle is wrong, but the delivery of this is not good. We have got a bad-looking scheme with some significant drawbacks, and it is not comparable to the situation at Len House. Is a listed building, And the issue there was bringing back a listed building. So there were particular issues there that had to be addressed. In terms of Moat Road, which has been alluded to, the design of Moat Road is significantly better than this design, and the biodiversity and landscaping, although limited, is an actual real improvement. If this was up to the standard of the Moat Road development, I wouldn't be complaining, to be honest, but it isn't, and we should be doing better, and we are not. One final point, in terms of this appalling policy, this zero value policy in the town centre, I didn't vote for it. I think it's an appalling evasion of the council's responsibility to the public. And I did not vote for the local plan last night because I think the local plan that we have adopted, although it has some good things in it, is vague to the point of meaninglessness. And when you look at the policies in relation to this site, they are incredibly vague. You could drive a coach and horses through someone. That's the new policy. Now, I actually think we could improve this application significantly with a little bit of work. So I wouldn't be desperately upset if we send it away to be reconsidered, but in some detail. But as it stands at the moment, I can't vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Garton, and then Cox and Wilkinson.
I'm sure that Councillor English would like to improve on this. However, to improve a plan of this scale, you need to have the right money for it. Maidstone itself does not have the money in our own back pocket. So we do have to rely on other agencies like Homes England to provide us with the financial backing to build our own affordable homes. As a matter of fact, since January 2023, we now acquired 90 homes, which we're currently in the process of converting into affordable homes, and some of them are actually not affordable homes, but social rent homes, so the actual lower rent which we will charge. And all these schemes are properly stacked up, they're tested. We will have a sound investment for this borough. Unfortunately, we could not find financial partners who would allow us on this site, site which we sort of inherited initially with KCC, who then jumped ship. There's no money and there's no funding available. And as a market participator, as well as a social housing provider in Maidstone, we have to choose what we can afford and what we can't afford. And unfortunately, the financials are as they are.
Mr. Jarman.
Sorry. Okay. In terms of retail, with the Marks and Spencer's application and the Aldi application, I think Richard wrote both committee reports, and it was spelled out amongst other considerations that both of those companies contacted the landowner as to the availability of the land, and it was not available for either of those developments. And that is on public, that is was in the reports and is on public record, and no doubt will be discussed at the public inquiry with the Aldi appeal. So, well, as I said, it was because we have to do a sequential test. Obviously, this is a much better site than Eclipse Business Park or Newnham Court. But I'm a planner.
I know just we've got people speaking, but North Maidstone does not have any supermarkets. It overtrades at the Wheeler Street Aldi to the nth degree, and that's one of the reasons looking for other sites. Every attempt to get a supermarket in summer has been stymied by Maidstone Borough Council. And now we're told, oh, they looked at the site, but were told it wasn't available, when actually that is more policy compliant with the current policy on this site than this tenement blocks are.
So all I'm saying, a bit like Councillor Russell said earlier, I'm just stating it as a fact. So, sorry, Chairman. So
carry on, Mr. Jarman.
The point I was making about both Len House, because Len House wasn't just the conversion. From memory, it was over 160 units of new build. And so looking at the site as a whole, that definitely had less open space here. The point I was making about Moat Road was that's had less open space here. Well, one comment on that. I was at pains to begin with to say, you know, design is very important. I do see concerns about the massing. You know, Richard did, you know, set out the cross section there. I think, you know, this is all a balance. Obviously, I know that sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's a balance. I would disagree with Councillor Gorton. Good design is not about money. It's about being sensitive and contextual to the surroundings. But so far this evening, I haven't heard specific harm being identified in terms of, for example, the scale and massing.
Councillor Cox, we hear from you.
When we see the cross-section view, and we're talking about the height of the building, and then we heard that perhaps taller buildings should be at lower levels. Why is it that that's that way round? It just seems strange. Why wouldn't you put it? And also the massing. When you look at the roof sections, you seem to have 2 floors in the roof. I find it very dominating on that view. It dwarfs the centre section, the block E, makes it very subservient, and we have so many balconies. I just see so many issues with balconies. I've said it before. And lastly, where we're talking about open space for play areas, I don't know how Councillor Hubb was necessarily getting to 200 children, but we don't really know what's going to be in there. But I agree that there needs to be more secure open space in a development like this, where there are potentially going to be children. If those are open space for the people who live there, it shouldn't be public realm. The front section, block A and B, is public realm. It faces the street. But why isn't there a designation area that it's gated? And so therefore it is a more of a safe area for children to be in. This has been a movable feast, which I haven't necessarily been in contact with. As Councillor English said, I haven't seen an open come in and talk to us about the plans as they are now. And this does appear that we've had changes. The design part says, as we go from page 75, that we've looked at multiple pitched roofs. Can you put the side thing up again and leave it there? Multiple pitch roofs, gables, metal balconies, slender balcony railings. I'm sorry, it just looks like another block. If you go back down to Len House, there's a development just to the east of it that actually does look a bit like a wharf. Now, this is visible from the river. So why aren't we taking the cues from what can be seen and what might have been there? The old warehouse that used to be down by the front river. And I just think I don't know, it was viable. This was more viable, but I'm afraid we've had a little bit of a thing called a financial crisis. is this the right time to push for this if it's not viable? That was one point. My last point is, if we're looking for 1,000 affordable homes, why aren't we subsidising 60 of these units with the £50,000 a unit and making them part of the 1,000 homes? That's what the money is there for. They should be affordable. What's affordable? I think there are 8 different classifications of what affordable homes are, but they need to be more affordable than we're saying, well, we've got to build them like this and there's no way we can make it work. If that's because of the current price to build something, then it isn't the right time to say, yes, these houses will be there for 50, 60, 70 years, fingers crossed. So therefore, they've got to be affordable now, or a percentage. I agree, we should stand by what we say to other people who apply for application, as near as damn it. But this is not damn it. I don't want to push this into the long grass because it's an application that's before us at committee, but I can't really see a way at the moment because we can't change what's before us, and yet it doesn't really tick all the boxes. That's a bit of a better angle, but just the balconies, what are people going to put all over them? The washing, several bikes because it's too far away from a bike rack. It's going to look terrible, and I don't really think this is right. What we're being shown, there have been changes. I have seen that image before, but it just doesn't do it for me, I'm afraid, at the moment. And the issue about safety, if there's going to be play areas and space for people to be in, it should be secured. And that doesn't seem, unless it is in there and I'm missing it. So I'm devil in a deep blue sea at the moment. I'm not undecided, but I need some assurances if they're possible.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I'd echo Councillor McKenna's comments earlier. I can't, in all good conscience, vote for a development with nil affordable housing. But just regarding this draft memorandum of understanding, I assume it's in the public realm because I've tried to trawl through and use reasonable endeavours to find it. It must be there. But I mean, it's, yeah, phrases like reasonable endeavours and high probability don't fill me with a great deal of confidence, to be honest. Yeah.
Do you comment on that, Councillor, Mr. Jarman, or is that beyond your?
Yeah. As I said, it's quite a complicated situation. The applicant has chosen, on the one hand, to run a viability argument, and the methodology which was submitted is perfectly in line with the NPPG. Yeah. We employed consultants, BNP Paribas, who didn't think the development was in the red as much as the applicant. However, it was deeply in the red by the tune of 35 million. So the applicant can say they've taken on board what it says in the NPPG. They've submitted a viability assessment, which has been verified by Maidstone Borough Council as a local planning authority. So they can't, on the one hand, they can't afford to provide affordable housing. However, because of the way Homes England operate, and because of the way local authorities are funded, it is an entirely plausible scenario that the council can get a full grant, which would mean 100% affordable housing at with this proposal.
Councillor McKenna?
Probably an impossible question to ask, but what's the realistically likelihood of that happening? I know that's again such an impossible question, but it's such an important vote. And if I vote on the premise that actually, you know, we might get this money and it transpires, you know, in realistic chances, there's a 15% chance. It really sways my vote. What's your realistic thought process of will it or won't it? Honestly.
Yeah, sorry to keep saying this. You know, I find it quite difficult in that this is a council application, and we're all part of Maidstone Borough Council. So I must admit, I'm quite surprised that this issue, which is a fundamental one, doesn't seem to have been debated. And I'm surprised because I've been close to this for probably 4 years. So I'm quite surprised that we're having this discussion. To be honest, and to be simplistic, I don't work for Homes England. I don't know how many schemes are in the queue, but I'd be very surprised because it's in Maidstone Council's control, isn't it? I'd be very surprised if Maidstone Council does not apply to Homes England. Like, why wouldn't they? Because, as I keep saying, I thought the stated aim of this council, in fact, the primary aim, although I think I might have got it wrong, was this delivery of affordable housing. So why wouldn't we?
Sorry,
Thank
just,
you, Mr.
sorry,
Mr. Sims.
Chair. It's paragraph 6.139 of the report, page 85. Obviously, as planning officers, page 85, 139, as planning officers, we can't say whether the council will or it won't. But what we've set out there is that we think there's a high probability because of the stages here, the council announcing it would do the 1,000 new affordable homes. But I think towards the end, where we're saying the cabinet decided to approve that the council can enter into a local authority grant agreement with for the Affordable Homes Programme 2021 to 2026 with Homes England. So the council, which is not us as the local planning authority, have committed to that. Whether they are successful is a different matter. We can't get involved in that, and the memorandum of understanding is for them to, within a time period of commencement, to apply for that. So that's the best we can do through a planning application. But I think 6.139 is us setting out the chronology of the council and its intention for affordable housing, and that's all we can tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Timms. I think that what Councillor McKenna is getting at, and what I'm sort of anxious to resolve here, is whether the Borough Council can actually do what happened to the site in Lenham and make it all affordable, and seeing what grants we can then get from Homes England. Now, whether or not that has been investigated in the past, I don't know. But I'm very conscious that we are putting pressure on both Mr. Timms and Mr. Jarman here about issues which they have no responsibility for. And, you know, there is a Chinese wall between what Maidstone Borough does as a corporate body and what we do as a regulatory body. And as a regulatory body, we should be treating everybody the same or as close as we possibly can. And I think we're finding ourselves all in a very difficult situation here, and I'm sort of looking for ways to try and resolve it. But Councillor Cox, do you want to come in?
This isn't a direct question to Rob or Mr. Timms. The only potential way I see is to get this absolutely clarified, and while the current cabinet are able, and because they're the link really to this, if it says here it's could be part of the 1,000 affordable homes, that's what I just mentioned a minute ago. which would make 60 of them, or whatever we decide, or the council decides, the applicant decides to do. But at the moment, that's not what they're proposing. So this application is not right. But is it that we turn it down and say no, or defer it so that we can get that clarified? Is there potential to turn this to 30% affordable or all affordable, 100%? So I'm happy to put that forward, because I don't want to just kill this if we should be reading 6.139 in more detail and trying to work around it. I just think there's no point in running this and dropping it if we're missing the detail, and it's wrong to ask the two officers to clarify that. So I think the applicant should come back to us with this viability, and why is there no affordable, one, and two, could there not be affordable? And they need to state that a bit more clearly. I'm happy to move that if that's.
I would second Councillor Cox's proposal that we defer and try and get the applicant, the director, if need be, to come. And if it has to be in part two, then it has to be in part two. But I think we need some further explanation of this, and we're not going to get it from the planning officers because they're not in a situation. And while we're at it, while we're deferring it, could we actually look at the issue of whether we can have some secure play areas for the children on the site? Because
buildings where they are.
West of block A and B would be logical.
Can we speak one at a time, please?
Yeah, I would like to say that, and if we are going to defer for that clarification, could we also, and I think this is actually a very important issue, look at whether we can have some secured play area for the residents of these buildings, which is not accessible to the general public.
Well, thank you, Councillor English. I have Councillor Russell, and then Garton, McKenna, and then back to Harwood. Is that okay? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit disappointed tonight, just because I've not been on planning committee long, and there's 11 of us, yet it seems like a couple can just keep talking whenever they want, and the rest of us are waiting patiently and using our microphone. So I think that's a little bit disappointing. Just to pick up a couple of points about public consultation, I think there was 2 public consultations because I went to one of them, but one was on March the 14th and one was on March the 16th. There was a big exhibition about it that anyone could go to. And then I just think that obviously, as it's a council application, we don't have the right of appeal. So I think we do need to be really careful. So taking on board the point that was on the table about deferral, I think, I am mindful that our council's main policy is the 1,000 affordable homes, and we need to achieve those wherever we can. I wouldn't want to lose this site that could potentially be for 217 affordable houses in the middle of the town centre. That would be, I think, morally wrong because we don't get the right of appeal. So I'm very happy to have a look at that deferral so that we can bottom that point out, because I think that is very necessary. And also the bit about if we can put the secure play thing in there, well, why wouldn't we? But I think, sometimes I do think as well, I know people get really emotive with these things. They are emotive, but sometimes we're told, oh, we can't say anything that's not a material planning consideration. And then other times we're allowed to do 10 million things that aren't material planning considerations. And I think we should be mindful that we are the planning committee. We're not the let's just say exactly what we feel all the time committee. I think, in my short tenure here, I'm finding it hard to grasp the kind of consistency between different applications and different things that are being said at different times. And obviously I'm still learning alongside everybody else, but I'd be really happy to move to that vote for deferral, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Garton and Councillor McKenna.
Well, Councillor Russell just made the point that there were public consultations. There was also a member briefing on the 19th of June last year. Going forward from page 85 onwards, Home England's grant funding. This cabinet is very much committed to build as much affordable homes as possible and get grants wherever available. My understanding so far is that this is partially a chicken and egg. Get planning permission, then we can talk about grant funding, and on the other hand, it may not be that readily available as we wish here tonight. Now, I think going forward, we're more than happy to give the assurance to this chamber from the cabinet. I hope my two colleagues will agree there that we will seek all means of possible funding for affordable homes, and that is quite clearly stated here at 6.139. There's a high probability that the applicant will apply. Well, let's make it a planning condition that the applicant should apply. I would have no reservations about that. And then take it further. But tonight, this committee is supposed to judge this purely on planning grounds. There are other committees and other packs where we will deal with the technicalities, with the financing of this project, and whether we can afford or not afford to make affordable or social housings residences out of those flats. I'm very much committed to do it where it is financially possible.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to reiterate the comments I made right at the start, and that was to say I think Rob and Richard contextualised it as well as they could. So I think they have done that, and we have really given it to them. So yeah, I think they've done as much as they can. If we're going to defer this, which I think is probably the right option, I do want to take. I do want sort of Councillor Harwood to come back on some of the design aspects and try and defer it for if we're going to defer it for that, let's defer it for the whole raft of reasons and hopefully come back with, you know, a really good development that takes in line, you know, good green space, you know, better develop, you know, as best as we can get. So, you know, a good deferral to take in line all of those. But I'll be keen to just get a few more bits in to make sure it comes back ready to go.
Right, Councillor Russell, you want to come back again? Oh.
I really just do want one final comment, which is keep in mind what we're aiming for as a council. If we hold ourselves to, you know, much higher standards than every other developer that comes to our borough that wants to build something, what are we saying to our residents? That we can't ever actually achieve you any affordable housing because we've got to make it gold plated with gold taps, with gold roofs on. You know, I think, yes, but let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good when you're actually trying to achieve something which is for the residents of our borough. And I think that deferral is the right way to go. And I think we should come back and have a look at it. But I also do think that we need to keep in mind the aim, what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to get to, which is 1,000 affordable houses. And I think, you know, it's a big capital programme. It's a big revenue budget impact. We mustn't lose sight of what we're trying to achieve by trying to make everything 100% totally amazing all of the time, because then we might as well just give up the whole programme as a council and just let the developers do it, because the developers will come here, put in a scheme, and then they'll go away, they get appeal, and then we get that back. Oh, it's better than the last one, we better agree it. Or they come back with a section 73. Oh, it's a section 73, never mind. We'll let them off some of their obligations, because rather than do it after 50 houses, they can do it after 100 houses now. I think we do just need to be really careful, because actually, if we can't achieve some of the things we're setting out to do as a council with our building side of the programme, then maybe we should look at taking it off the table, because it's unachievable the way we're going about it. Thank you.
Just ask Mr. Jarman to come back, and then I come back to you, Councillor McKenna.
Sorry, I'm not arguing against a deferral, but I have to go over it just one more time. It is common for developers, leave aside local authorities, it is common for developers to put in viability assessments to show they can't provide any affordable housing. The main reason they do that is because we then do not lock them into a Section 106 agreement. Yeah. So then they have a choice. They can either just have no affordable housing, and usually it's just rent, or they've got the opportunity, and a lot of them do. I dealt with a lot of sites along the River Medway. We didn't lock them into a certain percentage of affordable housing. So lots of them, and I can think of certain developments, became 100% affordable housing. Why? Is because you cannot get money for affordable housing from Homes England if you've got a Section 106 saying 30%, 40%, 5%. That's just the way they work. So it's got to be zero to get your funding from Homes England. Yeah, it's that, because what I'm concerned about is, like Councillor Russell and Councillor McKenna said, at the end of the day, you can bring in the director, you can bring in Joe Bloggs. They'll be saying the same thing as me. So please be cognizant of that. And I'm not trying to be negative, but as Richard has whispered, at the end of the day, the applicant can only do so much. They can only say, yes, of course, we're going to apply for a Homes England grant. They can't do anything more than that.
So are we not allowed to say?
As I'm at pains to say, I'm not the applicant. I'm a planning officer.
Can we let Mr. Jarman finish?
Which is why I must admit I'm quite frustrated by what appeals to be a complete breakdown in communication of this, because as you've always said to me, Chairman, this is hardly a new site. You know, I can't remember when Maidstone Borough Council, admittedly with KCC, bought it, but I had a different director at the time. So it must be some time ago. But it appears, you know, it's the first we know about it. And the Homes England rules have not changed one iota. But to be more positive, as Councillor McKenna said, can we think very hard on the reasons for deferral? Because it's, you know, we've got to be fair to everybody. I hope that if we debate in the future, I think the Homes England funding will go away, as in, I think you'll be able to see it for what it is. Perhaps I'm being too optimistic. But what I don't want is for new problems to be presented, because, as Councillor Russell said, we can only defer something once. So let's be comprehensive about it.
I think Councillor Hart. Thank you, Mr. Jarman. I think we need to start thinking about the issues we want to have investigated. But can I just hear from Councillor McKenna first? He has had his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to come back on the whole giving up type thing and the deferral and the reasons for needing to get this right. If we do not get this right on the deferral, and it comes back and it goes through, it will be bought by a London authority and we'll end up with a massive social problem. So we have to get the deferral right, and this has to be a property that our residents of Maidstone want to buy, because otherwise we will be left with a huge social problem and someone will just brush their hands of it. So that's why this isn't about giving up. This is about doing the right thing with the right development for our residents, because they come first. So let's make sure we get the deferral 100% right for the right reasons, and green space is massive.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Well, can we start off with the board member? We'll start making a list of issues we want to have addressed.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. I mean, none of this is a surprise. The application is for 0%. I understand to go for, but I've spoken to Mr. Timms, I've spoken to Mr. Jarman about, can we have a legal agreement? Can we have some surety? Because you cannot grant permission without any surety that you're going to get affordable housing in the ward in Maidstone Borough that has the first most deprived sub-ward area in living environment indices of deprivation, and the third most sub-ward. It's, you know, it's really a significant issue. The other issue I've got, as has been pointed out, is very significant antisocial behaviour, largely because of lack of places for the children to go and just the scale and size of the population. So what I need to understand is that this is a community and not just residential blocks with no infrastructure to support. There's a lot of talk of infrastructure and we just lose it all the time, and nowhere to support or space to swing a cat. In terms of the design issue, I raised this right when I spoke first of all. In terms of the massing and the design and the amount of brick, it is going to be a glowering presence over the East Station and over Sessions House Square. It's going to fundamentally change the feel of a town where there's a prison wall, there's one office block, there's Sessions House, a listed building, and there's lots and lots of terrace back-to-back Victorian development.
Okay, so reason
for
deferment one, we will examine alternative massing.
Yes, and on a human scale, which actually fits with its setting in terms of design and materials.
The
And
massing
its
needs to be
density.
to fit its context.
The other issue, which I think was a significant one, is the fact that this is essentially pretty much almost entirely housing, when this was currently the local plan policy is around a mixed use. And I think that really needs to be considered, because we've not got a supermarket in that side of the town. We've not got, yeah. And I think the other issue is, we've talked about the open spaces. It's around, in terms of the biodiversity net gain, it's actually having some real, not a concrete podium and not a path. It's actually, the end where you come down towards Royal Engineers Road, there's real potential to have just a natural area at the end, but it's not. It's got development hard up to the stop. And if we're the local authority, why are we filling the plot so entirely with development? And where it's not filled, it's because there's underground car parks. That's the reality. There's no actual ground that's like dirt.
Sorry, can I just seek clarification? Are you saying, Councillor Harwood, it's the amount and quality of open space, or is it solely the quality of the open space? To use your words,
it's the quality, because
Right,
because we've got, as I say, we've got podiums over car parks counted into the open space. We've got the footpath you need to walk down to get to the flats counted as open space. It's usable and semi-natural open space. Currently, there is none, and it's important because this is a big residential. It's the size of a village. The number of people that live in it, or will live in it.
So we had 4 different issues there. There's the affordable housing issue, the design and the massing, public open space, the amount and the quality. And also, do you still wish to have the alternative uses, the supermarket, looked at as well?
I'm not sure that falls within this particular remit at the moment, but I do want to insist on the secured play area for the local residents. Yeah, which I don't think the chairman specifically mentioned that, but we do.
We did condition that, but I know we're going for deferral, but that is not a problem.
So I don't think anybody has actually proposed a deferral yet. I don't recall it.
They keep coming back. Can I be clear on this point about what information do you want on affordable housing?
No, I know. I think the key issue with the housing, and I'm sorry if I don't know if I'm cutting across someone or whether it's coming back to me, but is just the fact that we cannot approve something with 0%. I mean, if there is some legal agreement that we're going to go to homes, and then if that fails, then the application falls, you know, that sort of thing. But if this is just a private development for all of the reasons that were outlined, it cannot go ahead because we've got too many social problems out there now when I walk up there in a minute.
Chairman, I think we've got enough issues for deferral. Can we please move on, because we can discuss this all night, but if we've got to come back again and discuss it again, I'd rather knock it on the head.
I think it was Councillor Cox actually proposed deferral. I don't think we had a seconder. Oh, Councillor English. Okay. Do you wish to speak? Okay.
Thank you. I think my biggest stumbling block, now I'm pointed to section 613 running from 7 to 40, is section 6140 at the bottom of page 85, and I will read it. Despite the above, for the purposes of a decision making on this application, no affordable housing is being approved or secured, so potential affordable housing delivery through external funding cannot be given any weight in reaching a decision on this application. Now, to me, that is saying there is none. But above it says, but we're going to apply. Now, if that's the process, that should be made very clear to us. And I'm being pointed, I think, to say, well, it was. But that may have been June last year when it was the last interaction, which was the flag raising day in June for the Armed Forces Day. I don't know when it was what you're talking about, Councillor Garton, but that's where the problem seems to be here. For me, certainly, after hearing our situation. Now, the deferral, for the reasons we've stated, I think should carry on. And I think then I would have thought we will be clarified, members will be clarified generally on how this might be being obtained by the applicant, not by the planning committee or the planning officers, because that's not their duty. And I think that's where we have to draw the line here. So let's go for the deferral, as we've stated, because they're legitimate questions. They're not ambiguity.
So thank you for that. Can I just get it clear in my mind on the affordable housing? Because there may be a solution, I don't know. Is the fear that the development of 217 units or whatever number goes ahead and there isn't 100% affordable housing? Is that the concern? Right, okay, because there may be legal mechanisms to lock the applicant into that. Like, I don't know, please don't quote me on this, a Grampian or maybe a Cascade type legal agreement. Yeah. Yeah, that's very useful then. I can't guarantee that, but that on similar-ish things, we've used Grampians or Cascades. Okay.
Right, so are you all now clear on the reasons and the issues that are now going to be investigated? Can I ask Mr. Jarman just to list them all? I think he's busily writing them all down, just so we're all absolutely clear what we're voting for.
I think in terms of deferment, I've written down the reasons being to explore the possibility of more contextual massing. To be very accurate, I would put question mark against that. Secondly, to explore improving the quality of the open space proposed. Thirdly, to explore locking in the applicant by way, for example, of a Grampian condition or Cascade legal agreement into the delivery of 100% affordable housing. I have got a fourth point, which Councillor English referred to about, I think it was securing the, that can be, I don't think that needs to be a deferment because we could just condition that. It's a bona fide condition.
Right, is everybody quite clear on all of that? Has been proposed, has been seconded, votes in favour of deferment. Okay, thank you, members. Votes against? And there are no abstentions. Thank you, members. That was a very complicated and controversial debate. Thank you. Now declare the meeting closed and see you all next Monday. I'm sorry you and Tim to go through all that. I had no idea that was going to happen.